There is a particular kind of silence that falls over a boy the moment he looks out a train window and realizes his childhood home has vanished behind the bend in the tracks. It is a quietness that settles deep in the chest, woven with the gentle ache of leaving and the quiet flutter of the unknown. For so many young men, this journey began not with the roar of conflict, but with the steady, hypnotic rhythm of a train rolling south. The iron wheels hummed a long, metallic lullaby against the rails, carrying them away from everything they had ever known. They sat in the passenger cars, resting their heads against the vibrating glass, watching the landscape shift from the towering pine forests of the north, past the rolling golden plains of the Midwest, down into the deep, humid green of the southern states. They were so young. Some were farm boys whose hands were already calloused from years of gripping a plow, their eyes accustomed to tracing the vast, unbroken horizons of the prairie. Others were clerks and tailors from the crowded, bustling streets of the city, boys who had never known a sky unbothered by the smoke of industry. There were miners from the damp hills of coal country, and fishermen who still carried the faint scent of the salty ocean breeze in their hair. They came from every corner of a vast and varied nation, carrying worn leather valises, cardboard suitcases tied with twine, and quiet hearts full of 1,000 private thoughts. When the trains finally sighed to a halt, the doors opened into the thick, warm embrace of Georgia. The air here was different. It was heavy, sweet with the scent of damp earth and pine needles, resting on the skin like a warm woolen blanket. They stepped down onto the ground, and beneath their boots, they found the soil that would become their first true teacher. The earth of Camp Gordon was a rich, vibrant red clay. It was a fine, powdery dust in the afternoon heat, and a thick, clinging mud in the morning dew. It coated the hems of their trousers. It settled onto the tops of their shoes. It was as if the earth itself was rising up to claim them, to bind them together in its dusty red hands. In those first few days, they were merely a collection of strangers walking out of step. They traded the soft cotton of their civilian lives for the stiff, scratching wool of unfamiliar uniforms. There is a profound vulnerability in folding away the clothes your mother washed and ironed, the favorite shirt you wore on summer evenings, and placing them into a box to be sent away. In putting on the olive drab, they were stepping out of their old identities. They looked at each other in the hazy morning light, adjusting stiff collars and heavy belts, seeing mirrors of their own uncertainty in the faces of the men standing beside them. The days were built on rhythm. In the beginning, the rhythm was clumsy. Boots tangled. Shoulders bumped. The hot Georgia sun beat down upon their wide-brimmed hats, casting long, wavering shadows across the drill field. But slowly, over the passing weeks, the awkwardness began to melt away into the heat. The solitary sound of 100 different footsteps began to merge into a single, rhythmic heartbeat. A heavy boot falling against the red clay, then another, and another, until the sound was no longer a clatter, but a deep, resonant pulse. They learned to move as one gentle, breathing entity. When the boy from Iowa grew faint from the southern humidity, the boy from Brooklyn quietly reached out, catching his elbow, steadying him before he could fall. They did not need to speak. The gesture was a soft whisper of reassurance in the bright light of day. When they paused for a rest, sitting under the welcoming shade of a towering oak tree, they shared the warm, metallic-tasting water from their canteens. A canteen passed from a hand stained with the grease of a Chicago garage to a hand that knew the delicate work of a watchmaker in Boston. In the quiet sharing of water, the invisible lines that divided them by geography, by class, and by background simply washed away. As the sun began its slow, golden descent below the tree line, the intense heat of the day would finally break. The evenings in the camp brought a beautiful, sweeping relief. The sky would bruise into deep shades of violet and indigo, and a cool, forgiving breeze would drift through the rows of canvas tents and wooden barracks. This was the hour of quiet reflection. This was the time when the camp settled into a soft, murmuring peace. Inside the tents, the glow of kerosene lanterns cast warm, flickering pools of yellow light against the canvas. In this dim and gentle illumination, you could hear the quietest, most heartbreaking sound of the era, the soft scratch of lead pencils moving across thin paper. They sat on their narrow cots, knees drawn up to balance small wooden writing boards, pouring their hearts out in quiet letters sent back to the towns they had left behind. They did not write of grand ideals or the looming shadows of the world. They wrote of the small, beautiful things that anchored their souls to the earth. A boy with a soft Appalachian drawl wrote to his sister, asking if the leaves had begun to turn yellow on the old maple tree by the porch. A young man from a busy northern city wrote to his mother, telling her that he missed the smell of her baking bread on a Sunday morning, and promising her that he was wearing his warm socks just as she had asked. They folded these pieces of themselves into small envelopes, sealing them with a silent prayer. These letters were fragile paper bridges stretching across thousands of miles, holding tight to the loves and comforts of home. For those who could not write, or whose hands shook too much from the exhaustion of the day, there was always someone willing to help. A former schoolteacher from Ohio would sit patiently beside a farmhand who had never learned his letters, listening carefully as the farmhand dictated his thoughts, translating his quiet love for his family into neat, flowing script. It was a small act of profound kindness, a shared secret between two men who, just weeks ago, had not known the other existed. As the night deepened, the lanterns were softly blown out, one by one. The camp surrendered to the dark. But the darkness here was not empty. It was filled with the rhythmic breathing of 100 sleeping men, a gentle tide of rising and falling chests in the cool night air. Outside, the southern woods awoke with their own ancient lullaby. The hypnotic hum of cicadas, the rhythmic chirping of crickets in the tall grass, and the low, distant call of a night bird weaving through the pines. Lying there in the dark, staring up at the shadows on the ceiling, a boy might feel a sudden pang of loneliness. The fear of the unknown, of the vast ocean they would soon cross, would creep in like a cold draft. But then, he would hear a soft sigh from the cot next to him. He would hear the quiet rustle of a woolen blanket being pulled up against the night air. He would remember the shared water, the letter written, the hand on his elbow when he stumbled. And the fear would gently recede, replaced by a warm, quiet comfort. He was not alone. He was surrounded by brothers he had never known he had. There were boys from all 48 states, drawn together in this quiet clearing in the woods. They had brought the snows of New England, the deserts of the Southwest, the towering peaks of the Rockies, and the restless energy of the eastern shores, and folded them all together into the red Georgia clay. They were a tapestry of an entire nation, woven together by shared exhaustion, shared letters, and shared dreams. They had become something entirely new. They were, in the truest sense, all-American. When the morning bugle would finally sound, breaking the stillness of the dawn with its clear, brassy notes, they would rise again. The air would be crisp, the grass wet with silver dew. They would lace their heavy boots, their hands moving with a practiced, quiet grace. They would step out into the early mist, the red clay waiting to greet them. They did not yet know the names of the distant forests they would eventually walk through. They did not yet know the weight of the history they were about to carry. But as they stood shoulder to shoulder in the soft, gray light of the morning, watching the sun crest over the tops of the Georgia pines, they felt a quiet, unwavering resolve. They had learned to walk in step. They had learned to breathe the same air and carry the same hopes. And as the mist slowly burned away, revealing the long, dusty road ahead, they were no longer a scattered collection of boys far from home. They were a family, forged in the quiet heat and the gentle nights, ready to face whatever lay beyond the horizon, walking softly, and walking together. In the damp, whispering forests of France, ordinary young men wait in the trenches under a canopy of stars, holding onto worn photographs from home to quiet their trembling hands. There is a profound, heavy stillness that settles over the Argonne forest in the deepest hours of the night. It is an ancient woodland, a place of towering oaks and dense, tangled underbrush that seems to hold its breath as the darkness deepens. The air here is entirely different from the warm, pine-scented breeze of the Georgia clay they left behind. It is cool, carrying the sharp, earthy scent of damp soil, fallen autumn leaves, and the faint, metallic whisper of rain that has just passed. The mist rolls in slowly, like a soft gray tide, pooling in the hollows of the earth and wrapping itself around the trunks of the trees. Hidden within the roots of these great, silent trees, carved into the very earth itself, are the trenches. To the young men sitting within them, these narrow corridors of mud have become a strange, temporary home. They sit shoulder to shoulder in the dark, their olive-drab wool uniforms heavy with the dampness of the French night. The cold tries to creep into their bones, but they huddle close, sharing the meager warmth of their bodies. They lean against the earthen walls, feeling the steady, solid presence of the dirt against their backs, a grounding force in a world that suddenly feels incredibly vast and unknown. If you were to walk softly down this line of waiting men, you would not hear the grand, sweeping sounds of history. You would hear only the quietest, most human sounds in the world. You would hear the slow, measured breathing of a boy from Michigan trying to steady his heart. You would hear the soft, rhythmic clicking of a metal rosary slipping through the fingers of a grocer's son from Boston. And you would hear the fragile rustle of paper. In the faint, silver light of the moon that filters through the canopy above, hands reach into breast pockets. These hands are no longer the soft, unblemished hands of clerks and students. They are stained with mud, nicked by wire, and weary from labor. Yet, they move with extraordinary gentleness as they withdraw their most precious possessions. They unfold letters that have been read and refold so many times the creases have become as soft as worn linen. They gaze at small, black and white photographs with creased corners. In the dim light, a boy looks at the face of a girl standing by a white picket fence in Ohio. Another stares at a picture of his parents sitting on the front porch of a farmhouse in the endless plains of Kansas. These small squares of paper are not just memories, they are lifelines. In the quiet dark of the Argonne, a photograph is a promise that a gentler world still exists. It is a tether to a life made of Sunday dinners, the smell of fresh laundry on a clothesline, and the sound of a screen door slamming in the summer heat. The boys press their thumbs against the faces in the photographs, drawing an invisible, soothing warmth from the image. It is a quiet, private ritual. It is a way to tell their own trembling hands that everything will be all right. Fear, in these quiet hours, is not a thing to be ashamed of. It is simply a silent companion, sitting beside them in the damp earth. It is the chill that makes a shoulder twitch, the tightness in the throat that makes it hard to swallow. But in this shadowed forest, fear is met with the softest, most beautiful kind of resilience. When the boy from Pennsylvania begins to shiver, the boy from New York does not say a word. He simply reaches out, unfastens his own woolen blanket, and gently drapes it over his friend's shoulders. He pats him softly on the back, a quiet rhythm of comfort. I am here. You are not alone. Down the line, someone carefully unwraps a single piece of peppermint candy, saved for weeks in the bottom of a pack. He breaks it perfectly in half, handing a piece to the stranger beside him who has become, in the span of a few months, a brother. They let the sweetness melt on their tongues, closing their eyes, allowing the simple taste to transport them, for just a fleeting moment, to a candy counter in a quiet hometown thousands of miles away. These are the unseen moments of heroism. History often forgets the quiet courage it takes simply to stay awake while your friend steals an hour of sleep. It overlooks the bravery of a soft smile offered in the dark, or the profound strength required to whisper a joke when your own heart is heavy. But beneath the ancient trees of the Argonne, this everyday heroism is the very thing that keeps their spirits glowing like warm embers in the cold night. To pass the time, they talk in hushed, rhythmic whispers. Their voices blend with the rustling leaves, a gentle murmuring stream of sound. They do not talk of tomorrow, or of the miles they still have to walk. They talk of yesterday. They talk of the taste of fresh peaches in the late summer. They debate the best way to repair a bicycle chain. They recount the plots of movies they saw in crowded, darkened theaters back home. They weave a protective blanket of normalcy out of their shared memories, wrapping themselves in the familiar to ward off the chill of the foreign night. Sometimes, when the whispering fades, they simply tilt their heads back and look up. Through the breaks in the heavy oak branches, the night sky reveals itself. It is a breathtaking tapestry of stars, glittering like scattered diamonds on black velvet. There is a deep, profound comfort in the stars. A boy resting his head against his canvas pack finds the constellation of Orion resting above the tree line. He traces the familiar shape with his eyes, a shape he has known since he was a child lying in the soft grass of his own backyard. The sudden, beautiful realization washes over him. The same stars looking down on this damp French forest are shining gently over his home. He imagines his mother, perhaps waking in the quiet hour before dawn, looking out her kitchen window at the very same moon. He imagines the silver light falling across his empty bed, across the quiet streets of his neighborhood, across the vast, sleeping continent of America. In the boundless expanse of the night sky, the distance between the Argonne and home vanishes. They are resting under the exact same blanket of stars. As the deepest part of the night begins to wane, a subtle shift occurs in the forest. The wind settles into a soft, rhythmic lull. The air grows even cooler, that pristine, hushed chill that always precedes the dawn. The shadows of the Argonne, which had seemed so tall and imposing hours before, begin to soften at their edges. The men in the trenches do not stir quickly. They move with the slow, deliberate grace of those who are husbanding their strength. They carefully fold their letters back into perfect squares. They slide the photographs of their sweethearts, their mothers, and their beloved dogs back into the pockets closest to their hearts, buttoning the wool tight to keep them safe. They share a final canteen of water, the metal cool against their lips. They wipe the dampness from their rifles with the hems of their sleeves. They look at each other as the sky begins to bruise from deep black to a soft, charcoal gray. In the faces of their brothers, they see their own quiet endurance reflected back at them. They see tired eyes, yes, but they also see a gentle, unwavering light. They have survived the night. They have held the darkness at bay not with iron or force, but with the quiet, stubborn love they carry for the lives they left behind, and the love they have discovered for the men sitting beside them. The mist begins to lift, rising softly through the branches toward the fading stars. A single bird calls out in the distance, a sweet, clear note welcoming the morning. The boys from the farms and the cities, from the mountains and the plains, take a deep, unified breath of the cool forest air. They stand a little taller in the damp earth, their hands no longer trembling, ready to step forward out of the shadows, carrying the gentle light of home within them into the new day. There is a single, suspended heartbeat of a moment just before you surrender yourself to the sky, a breathless pause where all the weight of the world simply falls away. Years have passed since the damp, shadowy trenches of the Argonne, and the world has turned beneath the steady passing of the seasons. Now, a new generation of young men stands on the sun-warmed earth, shielding their eyes to look upward. They are the younger brothers, the sons, and the nephews of those who once marched through the red Georgia clay. But they are not looking toward the distant horizon. They are looking at the clouds. They are dreaming of a place where no soldier has ever gone before, imagining what it might feel like to untether themselves from the ground and step softly into the boundless blue. To choose this path is a quiet, deeply personal act of bravery. It is one thing to walk into the unknown, but it is entirely another to fall into it. They arrive at the training grounds with wide eyes and racing hearts, boys from the sprawling, flat wheat fields of the Midwest who have never been higher than the roof of a barn, and boys from the crowded avenues of the city who have only ever seen the sky squeezed between tall buildings. Here, the sky is vast. It is an ocean of air, waiting to embrace them. The days of their preparation are filled with a strange, exhausting rhythm. But the evenings bring a quiet, meditative stillness. In the long, wooden packing sheds, the air smells warmly of canvas and clean cotton. Here, they learn the delicate, life-saving art of folding their parachutes. It is a slow, graceful dance. They stand at long wooden tables, their hands moving with profound reverence over the sheer, white silk. They learn to trace the long, thin suspension lines, ensuring they are perfectly straight, untangled, and smooth. There is a deep, unspoken trust in this simple act. To fold a parachute is to pack a promise. A boy from the rolling hills of Tennessee gently smooths a crease from the fabric, thinking of how this very piece of cloth will soon be the only thing holding him between the heavens and the earth. He tucks the silk away with the careful tenderness of a mother tucking a blanket around a sleeping child. It is a quiet prayer woven into the fabric, a silent hope that when the moment comes, the silk will bloom. In the barracks at night, the air is thick with anticipation. It hums with the soft, restless energy of young men standing on the precipice of something entirely new. The glow of the footlockers casts long, gentle shadows across the wooden floorboards. A young man sits on the edge of his narrow cot, a tin cup of water resting by his boot, carefully writing a letter to his parents. He pauses, his pen hovering over the thin paper. How does he explain the terrifying thrill of what he is about to do? He does not write of his fear, though it flutters like a trapped bird in his chest. Instead, he writes of the beauty of the aircraft gleaming in the morning sun. He writes of the deep, unbreakable bond he has formed with the man sleeping in the bunk above him. He writes, simply, that he is safe, and that the sky is a beautiful thing to behold. When the morning of the jump finally arrives, it comes with a cool, silver mist that clings to the airfield. The great, metal aircraft sit on the tarmac like sleeping giants, their silver wings wet with dew. The men walk out to the flight line in a long, quiet column. They are weighed down by heavy canvas harnesses, the cold metal buckles snapping against their chests, the thick webbing hugging their shoulders. It is a heavy, clumsy armor on the ground. They help each other adjust the straps, tugging here, loosening there. A hand rests gently on a trembling shoulder. A quiet nod is exchanged. I am with you. We will do this together. They climb into the belly of the aircraft, sitting face to face on long, cold metal benches. As the engines hum to life, a deep, resonant vibration trembles through the floorboards and up through their boots. It is a loud, steady purr that somehow acts as a peculiar lullaby, drowning out the nervous chatter of their own minds. The plane begins to roll, gathering speed, until suddenly, the rumbling of the tires ceases. The floor tilts upward. They are airborne. Inside the dim cabin, the air grows cooler. The scent of engine oil mixes with the smell of damp wool and the faint, sweet scent of peppermint candy someone is chewing to calm their stomach. They sit with their knees nearly touching the knees of the men across from them. In the shadowed light, they look into each other's eyes. There are no words needed now. They share a profound, singular understanding. They are a brotherhood suspended between the earth and the stars. The jumpmaster, a steady, calming presence, stands near the back of the cabin. When the moment draws near, he opens the metal door. Instantly, the cabin is filled with the roar of the wind. It is a rushing, invisible river of air, cold and crisp, sweeping away the warmth of the cabin. A red light glows above the open doorway, casting a soft, crimson hue over their determined faces. They stand up, hooking their static lines to the anchor cable above their heads. The heavy snap of the metal hooks is a reassuring rhythm, a final tether to the ship that has carried them. They shuffle toward the open door, moving closely together, each man drawing strength from the steady presence of the man directly in front of him. A hand presses gently against the back. Step by step. Almost there. And then, the light turns green. To stand at the open door of an aircraft in flight is to look out over the entire world. The wind pulls at the fabric of their sleeves, inviting them into the vastness. Below them, the earth has been transformed into a beautiful, patchwork quilt of emerald fields, winding silver rivers, and tiny, clustered forests. It looks so peaceful from up here, a quiet miniature world sleeping in the morning light. With a deep breath, the first man steps out into the rushing wind. Then the next. And the next. For a fleeting fraction of a second, there is a breathless, terrifying plunge. The stomach leaps, the cold air rushes past the ears, and gravity reaches out its invisible hand. It is a moment of total surrender, a falling away of every worldly worry, leaving only the pure, brilliant sensation of flight. And then comes the gentle jolt. Above them, the carefully folded white silk catches the wind. It rushes upward, blossoming like a magnificent, white flower against the blue sky. The heavy harness catches them, lifting them with a firm, comforting embrace. In an instant, the deafening roar of the aircraft engines disappears, fading into the distance like a passing storm. It is replaced by the most profound, crystalline silence they have ever known. It is a quiet so deep and pure that it feels almost holy. Hanging there beneath the glowing white canopy, a young man looks around him. The air is perfectly still, crisp and clean. The world below moves with a slow, hypnotic grace. He hears the soft, rhythmic creaking of the parachute suspension line stretching under his weight. He hears the wind whispering through the sheer fabric above his head. He hears his own breathing, slow and steady. He looks to his left and his right, and sees the sky filled with a gentle snowfall of white canopies. Dozens of his brothers are drifting down beside him, suspended in the same tranquil ocean of air. They are solitary voyagers in the great expanse, yet they are entirely together. A young man from a dusty prairie town calls out softly to his friend from the crowded city, his voice carrying effortlessly across the quiet sky. A gentle laugh floats on the breeze. In this magical, suspended world, there is no fear. There is only a sweeping, breathless awe. They are floating. They have sprouted wings in the silence of the morning, turning the terrifying emptiness of the sky into a sanctuary of peace. They watch the earth slowly rise to meet them, the miniature trees growing into towering oaks, the small green squares transforming back into fields of tall, whispering grass. When their boots finally touch the soft ground, they tumble forward, a practiced roll that absorbs the energy of their descent. The wind gently deflates the canopy, and the white silk cascades down around them, settling softly onto the grass like a heavy sigh. A paratrooper kneels in the morning dew, his hands gathering the fabric of his parachute. He feels the damp earth beneath his knees, grounding him once more. He looks up at the sky he just fell from, tracing the invisible path of his descent. His heart is still beating with the quiet thrill of the air, but his soul is wrapped in a profound peace. Another man jogs over, his harness jingling softly. They do not say much. They do not need to. They simply share a wide, knowing smile, clapping each other on the shoulder. They have stepped through the door of the sky. They have felt the rush of the wind and the quiet embrace of the silk. They have faced the terrifying expanse of the unknown, and they have drifted softly back to earth, changed forever. They gather their parachutes in their arms, turning their faces toward the sun, ready to walk forward together. They are tethered now not just by the uniforms they wear, but by the quiet, shared magic of the empty sky. There is a specific kind of darkness that hangs over the open sea, a vast and velvety black that makes you feel as though you are the only soul awake in the world. High above the shimmering expanse of the Mediterranean, the great metal ships of the sky drone steadily through the night. Inside the dim cabins, the air is thick with a quiet, humming anticipation. The young men sitting shoulder to shoulder along the cold metal benches are silent. Some have their eyes closed, their heads resting against the vibrating walls, letting the deep purr of the engines lull them into a fragile doze. Others stare out the small windows, watching the silver reflection of the moonlight dancing across the gentle waves far below. They are thousands of miles away from the porches and parlors of their childhoods, wrapped in heavy canvas harnesses, moving swiftly toward a shore they have never seen. It is a summer night, and the air inside the cabin is warm, smelling faintly of engine grease, polished leather, and the sweet, lingering scent of a shared cigarette. A boy from the rolling hills of Ohio reaches into his breast pocket, his fingertips brushing against the folded edges of a letter he received just days ago. He does not need to read the words in the dark. He has memorized the loops and curves of his mother's handwriting. He knows she is telling him about the tomatoes ripening in the backyard garden, about the neighbor's dog, about the quiet peace of a Sunday afternoon. He holds the letter against his chest, a paper talisman to ward off the chill of the unknown. Beside him, a young man from the crowded streets of Brooklyn is quietly turning a silver half-dollar over and over in his knuckles. It is a nervous habit, a rhythmic clicking that blends with the drone of the plane. His friend reaches out, placing a steady, calloused hand over the coin, stopping its motion. He offers a soft, reassuring smile in the dim, red light of the cabin. No words are spoken. None are needed. The touch alone is an anchor, a reminder that whatever waits for them in the dark, they will face it together. Suddenly, the heavy metal door is pulled open, and the night rushes in. It is not the biting, bitter cold they had braced themselves for. Instead, the wind that sweeps through the cabin carries the gentle, humid breath of the southern sea. It smells of salt, of distant sun-baked earth, and of ancient dust. It is the scent of Sicily. The red light above the door switches to green, glowing like a quiet lantern in the dark. They stand up, the heavy hooks of their static lines sliding along the steel cable. They shuffle forward, hand on the shoulder of the man ahead, a continuous, unbroken chain of brotherhood. When they reach the edge, they do not hesitate. They step out into the rushing wind, swallowed instantly by the warm, black velvet of the night. The moment you leave the plane, the deafening roar of the engines is snatched away by the wind. There is a sudden, breathtaking plunge, a feeling of weightlessness as you tumble through the ink-black air. And then, the silk blooms. The harness pulls tight, and the chaotic rushing of the wind is replaced by an absolute, profound silence. Drifting down through the Mediterranean night, a young paratrooper finds himself suspended in an ocean of quiet. Above him, the great canopy of his parachute glows faintly in the starlight, a sheltering umbrella of wind-tossed silk. Below him, the earth is entirely completely hidden in shadow. He cannot see the fields, or the roads, or the stone walls. He is floating through a dream, entirely detached from the world. For a fleeting minute, there is no war. There is only the gentle sway of the silk, the cool air against his cheeks, and the beautiful, sweeping tapestry of constellations overhead. He looks up and finds the North Star, feeling a sudden, deep comfort in knowing it is the very same star that shines over the farmhouse where he was born. When the ground finally rises up to meet him, it is soft and forgiving. He tumbles into the dry, sweet-smelling grass, the great silk parachute exhaling its borrowed breath and collapsing gently around him like a heavy blanket. He hurries to unbuckle the thick webbing of his harness, his hands moving with practiced memory in the dark. He gathers the endless folds of silk, burying them beneath the brush so they will not be seen. And then, he stands up. He is entirely alone. The great metal planes have flown on, their engines fading into a distant, muffled hum before disappearing altogether. The silence that rushes back in to fill the space is heavy and absolute. He is standing in an olive grove that has grown on this hillside for centuries. The trunks of the trees are gnarled and twisted, their silver leaves rustling softly in the warm breeze. The air is heavy with the scent of wild fennel, crushed thyme, and the dry, baked clay of the earth. It is a beautiful, ancient smell, yet to a boy from the rainy pine forests of the Pacific Northwest, it is entirely alien. He takes a slow, deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. He has been trained for this. He has studied maps and memorized landmarks, but in the pitch-black shadows of the grove, the maps mean nothing. He is simply a boy standing alone in the dark, far from home, searching for a familiar face. He crouches low against the base of an ancient olive tree, letting the rough bark ground him. He listens. He closes his eyes and pushes past the sound of his own breathing, reaching out with his ears into the night. At first, there is only the wind. But then, as the night settles, the native chorus of the island begins to sing. It is the rhythmic, hypnotic chirping of thousands of crickets hidden in the tall, dry grass. It is a gentle, pulsing sound, as natural and soothing as a heartbeat. It reminds him of summer evenings on his grandfather's porch, watching fireflies dance in the heavy humidity of July. The sound brings a sudden, unexpected wave of peace. The world, even here in the dark, is simply the world. He reaches into his pocket and his fingers close around a small piece of metal. It is a tiny, brass toy, shaped like a cricket. He rests his thumb against the flexible metal tongue. This simple, innocent object is his only lifeline in the darkness. He takes a breath and presses his thumb down. Click-clack. The metallic snap cuts through the soft chirping of the insects, a sharp, distinct sound. He releases the metal. Click-clack. He holds his breath, his back pressed tight against the tree. He waits. The silence stretches out, long and delicate. A minute passes. Then another. He begins to wonder if he is the only one who landed in this grove, if the wind blew him miles away from his brothers. The darkness begins to feel a little heavier, a little colder. But then, from somewhere out in the shadows, comes the faint, unmistakable reply. Click-clack. A pause. Click-clack. A wave of relief washes over him, so profound and powerful that his knees go weak. He is not alone. He stands up slowly, moving through the waist-high grass toward the sound. He does not call out. He moves softly, the dry earth crunching gently beneath his boots. He stops near a low stone wall, draped in heavy ivy. He whispers into the darkness, a simple word agreed upon before they ever boarded the planes. Flash, he breathes. From the other side of the wall, a shadow detaches itself from the darkness. A voice, trembling just slightly with the same overwhelming relief, whispers back. Thunder. The two shadows step toward each other. In the dim starlight, faces are impossible to make out, but it does not matter. The boy reaches out and grasps the sleeve of the other man's uniform. The heavy wool feels like the most wonderful thing in the world. Hands find shoulders, gripping tightly. A soft, breathless laugh escapes one of them, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. It is the boy from Brooklyn. He still has the silver $50 in his pocket. They do not embrace like heroes in a movie, they simply lean against the stone wall together, their shoulders touching, breathing out the tension that had been coiled tight in their chests. You okay? The boy from Ohio whispers, his voice barely louder than the wind. Yeah, the boy from Brooklyn whispers back, passing over his metal canteen. I'm okay now. They share a swallow of lukewarm water, the metal rim of the canteen passing between them. The water tastes faintly of canvas and tin, but in that moment, it is as sweet as nectar. They sit down in the dry grass, their backs resting against the ancient, sun-warmed stones of the wall. Slowly, as the hours creep by, they hear more clicks in the distance. They hear the soft rustle of footsteps, the whispered passwords floating on the warm breeze. Flash. Thunder. One by one, the shadows emerge from the olive groves and the dry riverbeds. They gather together under the branches of the great trees, moving quietly, communicating in soft nods and gentle touches. When a soldier realizes he has lost his helmet in the drop, another hands him a knitted wool cap from his own pack. When a boy's hands are shaking too much from the cold adrenaline to open his ration tin, the man next to him takes it, opening it quietly and handing it back without a single word of judgment. They are a patchwork family, scattered across a foreign sky and brought back together by the sound of a child's toy and the whispered echoes of a thunderstorm. They sit together in the sweet-smelling grass, wrapped in the warmth of the Mediterranean night. They pull the loose folds of their camouflaged parachutes over their laps to ward off the early morning dew. They do not speak of what tomorrow will bring. They simply rest in the profound comfort of having found each other. They listen to the crickets singing in the tall grass, a gentle lullaby carrying them through the final, darkest hours of the night. They lean their heads back against the ancient stones, watching the stars roll slowly across the heavens, waiting together in quiet resilience for the soft, gray light of the dawn. There is a fine, silver dust that clings to the ancient mountains of Italy, settling over the shoulders of weary young men like a quiet, earthly blessing. They have been walking all day, moving upward through a beautiful, unforgiving landscape. This is not the damp, shaded forest of their imaginations, nor the soft, yielding clay of their training grounds. This is a vertical world of pale limestone, steep, terraced hillsides, and winding, narrow paths carved by centuries of footsteps. As the sun beat down upon them, the dust rose in slow, swirling clouds, coating their heavy woolen uniforms, turning their olive-drab sleeves into a muted, ghostly gray. It settled in the creases of their boots and dusted their eyelashes, blending them perfectly into the ancient, rocky earth. But now, the sun has finally slipped beneath the horizon, and the intense heat of the day is breaking. A profound, sweeping sigh seems to move through the valleys. The harsh, brilliant glare of the Mediterranean afternoon gives way to a soft, forgiving twilight. The sky bruises into delicate shades of lavender and deep, bruised indigo, and a cool, gentle breeze begins to drift up from the distant sea, weaving its way through the groves of gnarled olive trees and the fragrant patches of wild thyme. The young men come to a halt along a high, rocky ridge. They move with the slow, deliberate grace of the entirely exhausted. There are no sudden movements, no loud voices. There is only the soft clinking of metal buckles and the heavy, grateful thud of canvas packs being lowered to the ground. They sink down against the sun-warmed boulders, letting the solid rock support their aching backs. They unlace their boots with trembling, dust-covered fingers, rubbing their sore feet and closing their eyes against the beautiful stillness of the evening. As the twilight deepens into a true, velvety night, the moon crests over the jagged peaks. It is a brilliant, heavy sphere of silver, so bright and close it feels as though you could reach out and touch it. The moonlight washes over the rugged landscape, painting the sharp rocks in soft shades of pearl and casting long, comforting shadows across the valleys. In this gentle illumination, the exhaustion on the faces of the soldiers is softened. The deep lines of worry are smoothed away by the silver light, leaving only the quiet, beautiful resilience of youth. Thirst is a heavy, quiet companion on these mountain climbs. The dry, dusty air leaches the moisture from their throats, leaving a longing for the cool, clear streams of home. A young man from the rainy, evergreen forests of the Pacific Northwest unhooks his metal canteen from his belt. It is surprisingly light. He gives it a gentle shake, hearing only a small, lonely slosh at the very bottom. It is perhaps 2, maybe 3 swallows of tepid water. He unscrews the small black cap. The rim of the canteen is warm, tasting faintly of tin and canvas. He raises it to his dry lips, preparing to tilt his head back. But then, he pauses. Out of the corner of his eye, he sees the boy sitting next to him, a quiet, lanky kid from the dusty plains of Texas, whose own canteen has been empty since midday. The Texas boy is leaning his head against a rock, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow and dry. The boy from the Northwest lowers his canteen. He does not take a sip. Instead, he leans over, gently nudging his friend's shoulder. When the Texas boy opens his weary eyes, he sees the metal canteen being offered to him in the moonlight. There is a profound, breathtaking heroism in this simple, silent gesture. In a world where everything is uncertain, where comfort is entirely stripped away, water is life itself. To offer your last drops is to offer a piece of your own survival. The boy from Texas looks at the canteen, then up at his friend's face. He shakes his head slowly, whispering a raspy refusal. But the first boy simply presses the canteen into his friend's calloused hands. "Drink," he whispers, a sound no louder than the wind in the dry grass. "I've had plenty." It is a beautiful, necessary lie. The Texas boy takes the canteen with trembling hands. He does not drain it. He takes one single, careful swallow, letting the water coat his parched throat, savoring the miraculous relief of it. Then, he wipes the rim with his sleeve and hands it back. The boy from the Northwest takes the final, solitary sip. The water is warm and metallic, but in that moment, It is the sweetest, most perfect thing he has ever tasted. It tastes of brotherhood. It tastes of a love so quiet and deep that it requires no words at all. They settle back against the stones, the empty canteen resting between them like a sacred, shared vessel. The coolness of the night deepens, a soothing balm against their sun-baked skin. The wind shifts, bringing with it the faint, sweet scent of crushed rosemary and dry pine, a perfume that belongs entirely to these ancient Italian hills. In the quiet, the men begin to empty their pockets, a nightly ritual of grounding themselves in the things they love. In the gentle glow of the moon, a soldier unfolds a piece of paper that has grown soft as cloth from being touched so many times. It is a letter from his wife. It is covered in the fine, white dust of the mountain, but he can still trace the curves of her handwriting. He traces the words with his thumb, closing his eyes and letting his memory supply the sound of her voice. He remembers the way she laughed when the wind blew her hair across her face. He remembers the smell of the vanilla extract she used when she baked, a scent that seems impossibly far away from this rocky, moonlit ridge. Another boy holds a small, battered pocket watch. It no longer tells the correct time, its delicate inner workings having surrendered to the dust days ago. But he winds it anyway, just to feel the familiar tension of the dial, just to hear the tiny, rhythmic ticking that reminds him of his grandfather's study. These small objects are anchors, heavy with love, tethering their floating hearts to the solid ground of their pasts. Eventually, the whispering fades. The letters are carefully folded and tucked back into breast pockets, held close to the heart. The men lie back on the uneven ground, wrapping themselves tightly in their wool blankets. They pull their knitted caps down over their ears to ward off the chill, becoming nothing more than still, quiet mounds in the vast, silver landscape. As they lie there, waiting for sleep to claim them, they look up. The sky above the mountains is a breathtaking canopy of stars. Without the glow of city lights to dim them, the stars seem to multiply by the millions, scattered like diamond dust across the deep, velvety black. The Milky Way is a luminous, milky river flowing straight over their heads. There is a deep, profound comfort in the stars. A young man from a small farming town in the Midwest finds the familiar shape of the Big Dipper resting just above a jagged peak. He smiles softly in the dark. He knows that constellation. He has watched it turn across the sky from the window of his childhood bedroom every night of his life. Lying there on the rocky earth of a foreign country, thousands of miles from the world he knows, he realizes a beautiful, calming truth. The same stars that are shining down on his dust-covered uniform are shining over his home. He imagines the timeline of the world. It is the deep of the night here on the mountain, but back home, evening is just beginning to fall. He imagines his mother standing at the kitchen sink, wiping her hands on a checkered apron, looking out the window as the first stars begin to prick through the twilight. He imagines his little brother sitting on the front porch steps, watching the fireflies rise from the damp summer grass. He imagines the quiet, steady rhythm of the life he left behind, continuing to beat, safe and unbroken. He whispers a quiet good night into the Italian breeze, trusting the wind to carry it across the ocean. He closes his eyes, wrapping the thought of his family around himself like a second, warmer blanket. Down the line, a sentry sits quietly on a high rock, his rifle resting across his knees. He is the guardian of their sleep, the quiet watcher in the dark. He does not feel the burden of his duty, he feels only a fierce, tender protectiveness for the sleeping boys behind him. He listens to the rhythmic, collective breathing of his brothers, a soft, oceanic sound that rises and falls with the wind. He watches the moon trace its slow, silver arc across the heavens, painting the mountains in an ever-shifting tapestry of light and shadow. The dust of the day has finally settled. The heat has surrendered to the cool, fragrant night. On this high, rocky ridge, there is no fear, no marching, no heavy burdens to carry. There is only the gentle moonlight, the shared memory of a sip of water, and the beautiful, sweeping blanket of the stars. The mountain cradles them in its ancient, stone hands, and the quiet night whispers a lullaby of peace, promising them that no matter how far they have traveled, the light of home will always find them in the dark. There is a profound, heavy tenderness in the air when a young man realizes he must fold his entire heart into a single, fragile envelope. In the damp, green quiet of the English countryside, a gentle rain is falling. It is the late spring, and the world outside the canvas tents is lush and impossibly alive. The ancient, moss-draped oak trees stand as silent guardians over the sprawling fields, their broad leaves catching the fine, silver mist that drifts in from the coast. The earth here is soft, covered in thick, rolling carpets of clover and tall grass that sway rhythmically in the cool evening breeze. It is a peaceful place, a landscape carved by centuries of quiet, rural life. To the young men gathered in the sprawling encampments, this soothing, pastoral beauty feels almost like a dream, a gentle contrast to the heavy reality of what tomorrow will bring. Beneath the great canopy of the trees, hundreds of heavy canvas tents are pitched in neat, orderly rows. Inside these canvas walls, the air is warm, carrying the familiar, comforting scents of damp wool, oiled leather, and the earthy perfume of the wet grass beneath their boots. The harsh, bright daylight has long since faded, surrendering to the deep, violet twilight of the English evening. As the darkness settles over the camp, small pools of golden light begin to flicker to life. Kerosene lanterns are carefully lit, their flames turned down low, casting a soft, amber glow that dances gently against the sloping canvas roofs. Tonight, there is no boisterous laughter. The usual, spirited banter that echoes through the camp has faded into a quiet, reverent hush. The men move with a slow, deliberate grace, their voices dropping to soft, rhythmic murmurs. They know that the great fleet of airplanes is waiting for them on the tarmac, their silver wings gleaming in the rain. They know the time for training has ended. And so, in these final, quiet hours before they must step into the dark sky over Normandy, they turn their thoughts across the ocean, to the homes and the people they love more than anything in the world. They sit on the edges of their narrow folding cots, using wooden supply crates and the tops of their footlockers as makeshift desks. They reach into their canvas packs and draw out small, treasured things, a smooth fountain pen, a stubby wooden pencil, a small bottle of blue ink, and sheaves of thin, translucent paper. To watch them write in the dim, golden light is to witness a beautiful, unspoken ritual. These are hands that have spent months learning the harsh, unyielding grip of a rifle, hands that have grown calloused from digging into the cold earth and pulling the heavy canvas of parachutes. Yet now, as they hold their pens, their fingers move with extraordinary gentleness. They touch the paper as if it were something sacred. What do you write when you are standing on the edge of the unknown? You do not write of the looming shadows or the vast, dark sea. You do not write of the cold wind or the fluttering fear in your chest. You write of the light. You write to protect the people you love from the heavy burden you are about to carry. A young boy from a quiet farming town in Indiana leans over his wooden crate, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. He is writing to his mother. He does not tell her that his hands are trembling just a little. Instead, he asks her if the hydrangeas have started to bloom along the front porch. He tells her he can almost smell the sweet, warm scent of her cherry pie cooling on the kitchen windowsill. He writes, with a slow, careful hand, that he has been eating well, that he has a warm pair of dry socks, and that she has absolutely nothing to worry about. It is a gentle, beautiful lie, born of a fierce and protective devotion. He folds his love into the shape of ordinary things, hoping the familiar words will bring a soft smile to her face when she reads them in the morning light. A few cots away, a newlywed from the busy, bustling streets of a northern city is writing to his young wife. He has a small, slightly creased photograph resting against his lantern, and he pauses every few minutes simply to look at her face. In the amber glow, he traces her name at the top of the page, his pen lingering on the letters as if he could feel the warmth of her hand through the ink. He writes to her of the future. He paints a picture of a small house with a white fence, of quiet Sunday mornings drinking coffee on the porch, of a life that stretches out long and peaceful after the storm of the world has finally passed. He pours all of his longing, all of his desperate, quiet hope, onto the thin paper. Every word he writes is a soft kiss, a promise tethered to a dream they share across thousands of miles of dark ocean. In the corner of the tent, sitting cross-legged on his blanket, a quiet soldier writes a letter to a child he has never met. A baby born while he was training in the damp fields of England. He stares at the blank page for a long time, listening to the gentle drumming of the rain against the canvas. He writes to introduce himself. He tells his child about the beauty of the stars, about the inherent goodness in the hearts of the men sitting around him, and about the deep, unwavering love he feels for a tiny life he has only seen in a blurry photograph. He leaves a piece of his soul on the page, crafting a timeless whisper of guidance and love from a father to his baby, ensuring that no matter what the dawn brings, his voice will always be there to comfort them. The quiet resilience of these men is breathtaking. They are entirely alone in their private thoughts, yet they are surrounded by a profound, wordless brotherhood. When a boy's pencil lead snaps, the man sitting next to him simply reaches over and silently hands him another, already sharpened. When a soldier's eyes grow misty, blurring the ink on his page, a friend casually offers him a piece of a chocolate bar, a small, earthly comfort to ground him. There is no judgment in the damp air, only a deep, shared understanding. They are all carrying the same heavy weight, and they are all reaching out for the same invisible tether to home. As the night deepens, the letters are slowly finished. There is a deeply moving finality in the act of sealing the envelopes. The men carefully fold the thin sheets of paper, making sure the edges are perfectly aligned. They moisten the flaps and press them down, running their thumbs along the seal. It is the closing of a door, the turning of a page. They have poured their deepest loves, their quietest fears, and their fondest memories into these small paper vessels. They write the addresses with meticulous care. Elm Street, Maple Avenue, a rural route in the rolling hills of Tennessee, a crowded apartment building in Brooklyn. The names of their hometowns feel like magical incantations in the English night, words that possess the power to transport them away from the rain and the cold. A quiet male clerk moves slowly down the rows of tents, carrying a large burlap sack. He steps softly, respectfully, knowing he is gathering something far more precious than gold. The soldiers stand up one by one, handing over their letters. The sound of the envelopes dropping into the canvas bag is like the sound of autumn leaves falling gently to the earth. Thousands of letters, millions of whispered words of love, all gathered together in the gentle rain. The clerk nods to each man, a silent promise that these pieces of their hearts will be guarded and carried safely across the world. With the letters gone, the task is complete. A profound, heavy relief settles over the encampment. There is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to say. There is only the waiting. The men begin to settle in for the night. They unlace their boots, their hands moving slowly, savoring the familiar rhythm of the routine. They lie back on their narrow cots, pulling the rough, scratchy wool blankets up to their chins, seeking warmth in the cool, damp air. One by one, the kerosene lanterns are turned down. The golden pools of light shrink to tiny, glowing embers, and then, with a soft puff of breath, they vanish entirely. The canvas tents surrender to the shadows of the night. In the sudden, velvety darkness, the world shrinks to the sound of the rain. It is a beautiful, rhythmic lullaby, drumming softly against the taut canvas above their heads. It is a constant, soothing white noise that washes away the nervous energy and quiets the racing mind. Lying there in the dark, staring up at the invisible roof of the tent, a soldier closes his eyes. He is no longer anchored to the muddy fields of England. He lets the sound of the rain carry his spirit away. He travels across the vast, dark Atlantic, flying faster than any airplane, until he is standing softly on his own front porch. He sees the warm yellow light spilling from his kitchen window. He feels the familiar, worn with the porch railing beneath his hand. He is home. He breathes in deeply, letting his muscles finally relax into the canvas cot. Beside him, he hears the slow, steady breathing of his brothers, a rising and falling tide of life that fills the quiet space. They are resting now. They have left their words behind on thin paper, trusting the world to deliver their love. Wrapped in the damp, green quiet of the countryside, they surrender to sleep, gathering their quiet strength for the sky that waits for them in the morning. There is a moment between the sky and the earth when the wind holds its breath, and all the noise of the world fades into a singular, rushing whisper. Plunging into the dark, tangled hedgerows of France, young men find courage not in grand ideals, but in the desperate need to find and protect the friends they trained alongside. They fell from the midnight sky like autumn leaves drifting down on a cool, quiet breeze. Above them, the great silk canopies blossomed in the dark, glowing faintly in the silver light of a hidden moon. The journey across the English Channel had been a heavy, rumbling passage, a sky filled with the deep vibration of thousands of engines. But the moment they stepped out of the heavy metal doors and surrendered to the night, the chaotic world was entirely stripped away. There was only the sudden, breathtaking embrace of the cold air, the sharp upward pull of the canvas harness, and then, a profound and boundless silence. Hanging in the dark, suspended by thin lines of silk, a young man from the vast, open plains of Nebraska looks down at a landscape he has never seen. He is floating over Normandy. The earth below is entirely draped in shadow, a mysterious patchwork of deep velvet greens and ink-black shapes. The wind whispers past his ears, a soft, soothing hum that almost sounds like a lullaby. For a few fragile seconds, he is entirely untethered from the burdens of the ground. He closes his eyes and lets the cool, damp air wash over his face, breathing in the scent of the French countryside. It smells of rich, wet soil, of ancient stone, and of apple orchards heavy with the promise of summer. When his boots finally brush the tops of the tall, wet grass, the landing is soft, cushioned by the damp earth. He tumbles forward, a practiced roll in the dark, and the great white parachute collapses gracefully around him, exhaling its captured breath with a gentle sigh. He kneels in the darkness, his hands quickly gathering the cool, slippery silk. He tucks it beneath the dense brush, hiding the white fabric from the moonlight. And then, he simply stops. He listens. The silence of the Norman countryside is entirely different from the quiet of the training grounds back in England. It is a heavy, ancient stillness. Slowly, as his eyes adjust to the gloom, the landscape begins to reveal itself. He is not in an open field, but entirely enclosed in a small, grassy pasture. Surrounding him on all sides are the hedgerows. These are not the neatly trimmed garden hedges of his childhood. These are massive, towering walls of earth, woven thick with centuries-old oak roots, twisting hawthorn branches, and dense, thorny brambles. They rise 10, sometimes 15 feet into the air, casting long, impenetrable shadows. They turn the quiet countryside into a vast, dark labyrinth. The heavy canopy of leaves blocks out the stars, leaving him in a cool, green twilight even in the middle of the night. He is entirely alone. The great plains have vanished into the distance, leaving only the soft hum of the wind rustling through the leaves. In this shadowed isolation, it would be so easy to let fear take root. It would be easy to feel very small in the face of the vast, turning wheels of history. But as he crouches there in the damp clover, his thoughts do not turn to the grand maps unrolled on generals' tables. He does not think of the liberation of a continent or the sweeping ideals of freedom and democracy. These things are too large, too abstract to hold onto in the dark. Instead, his heart focuses on something much smaller and infinitely more powerful. He thinks of the boy from Chicago who sleeps in the cot next to his. He thinks of the quiet, lanky kid from Georgia who always shared his care packages from home. He remembers the warmth of their shoulders pressing against his on the flight over, the shared glances of unspoken understanding in the dim red light of the cabin. He realizes, with a sudden, beautiful clarity, that he is not moving forward for a flag or a speech. He is moving forward to find his brothers. The courage that rises in his chest is not born of anger or fierce bravado, it is born of a gentle, desperate love. He must find them. He must make sure they are safe. He unlatches his heavy canvas pack, leaving behind anything he does not immediately need, moving with a quiet, deliberate grace. He steps softly into the shadows, the wet grass brushing gently against his calves. He approaches the great, looming wall of the hedgerow, running his bare hand along the rough bark of the hawthorn and the damp, crumbling earth. He finds a small, narrow gap in the roots and pushes himself through, emerging into the next small, silent field. The fog begins to roll in from the coast, a soft, silvery mist that creeps along the ground, wrapping around his boots and pooling in the hollows of the earth. It softens the edges of the world, turning the towering trees into ghostly, protective sentinels. He walks with slow, measured steps, placing each foot carefully to avoid snapping a dry twig. Suddenly, he hears a sound. It is not a loud noise, just a soft splash of water, a quiet rustle of canvas against leaves, coming from the deep shadows near a cluster of apple trees. He freezes, melting into the trunk of a great oak, holding his breath. He waits, his heart beating a steady, rhythmic drum against his ribs. He reaches into his memory for the soft, whispered password they had practiced 100 times in the damp fields of England. He takes a breath and lets the word slip from his lips, no louder than the rustle of the wind. Flash, he whispers. The silence stretches out, delicate and fragile as glass. He counts the seconds in his head. 1, 2, 3. And then, from the shadows beneath the apple branches, comes the gentle, beautiful reply. Thunder. A wave of relief washes over him, so profound and deeply felt that it brings a sudden warmth to his eyes. He steps out from the cover of the oak tree, moving toward the shadow. In the dim, misty light, he sees the silhouette of another paratrooper. They meet beneath the low-hanging branches of the apple tree. There are no loud cheers, no dramatic embraces. They simply reach out, their hands finding each other in the dark. A firm, steady grip on a wool-covered shoulder. A soft pat on the back. "Is that you, Miller?" the shadow whispers. "Yeah, it's me," he breathes back, recognizing the soft, southern drawl of the boy from Georgia. "You hurt?" "No. Just landed in a flooded ditch. I'm completely soaked." Miller reaches into his canvas bag, his fingers finding a small, dry woolen towel he had tucked away precisely for this. He hands it over without a word. In the damp chill of the Norman night, this small square of dry cloth is a gift of unimaginable worth. It is a profound act of everyday heroism, a quiet testament to the bond that tethers them together. They sit down together in the wet grass, their backs resting against the solid trunk of the apple tree. The sweet, fermented scent of crushed apples rises from the earth, blending with the smell of wet wool and the metallic tang of their canteens. They sit shoulder to shoulder, pooling their quiet strength. The vast, terrifying labyrinth of the hedgerows suddenly feels a little less daunting, simply because they are no longer facing it alone. As the hours slowly pass, the fog thickens, wrapping them in a protective, silver cocoon. They listen to the night. Every now and then, they hear another soft rustle, another whispered password drifting through the mist. One by one, small groups of men begin to find each other in the dark. They emerge from the shadows like ghosts, their faces painted in streaks of black and green, their eyes wide and tired. When a boy realizes his hands are shaking from the cold and the adrenaline, the man next to him simply takes off his own dry gloves and presses them gently into his friend's hands. When a soldier finds he has lost his rations in the drop, a tin of peaches is quietly opened and passed around the circle, each man taking only a single, small taste so that everyone might have some. This is the sanctuary they build in the darkness. It is not made of wood or stone, but of small, beautiful moments of kindness. They are a patchwork family of farmers and city clerks, mechanics and school teachers, drawn together in the damp grass of a foreign land. They do not talk of the war. They whisper about the stars they can barely see through the leaves. They talk about the smell of their mother's kitchens, the soft hum of the radio on a Sunday afternoon, the letters they left behind in the canvas tents of England. They weave a blanket of familiar memories to keep the cold at bay. In the heart of the tangled hedgerows, they find their courage entirely within each other. The boy from Nebraska looks around at the faces of his friends, softly illuminated by the glow of a single, cupped match as they share a cigarette. He sees the dirt on their cheeks, the exhaustion in their eyes, and the quiet, unwavering love that binds them all. He knows that whatever the morning brings, he will not let them down. Slowly, imperceptibly, the deep black of the sky begins to soften. The edges of the leaves turn from ink to a deep, bruised purple, and then to a soft, charcoal gray. The night is lifting. The birds of Normandy begin to wake, their sweet, clear songs echoing through the labyrinth of trees, entirely indifferent to the history unfolding beneath their branches. The mist begins to glow with the first, fragile light of the dawn. The men begin to stir. They move with a quiet, synchronized grace. They check each other's equipment, their hands moving with the tender care of brothers. They brush the wet leaves from each other's shoulders. They share a final, communal sip from a canteen, the water tasting of tin and cold morning air. They stand up in the soft, gray light, the hedgerows towering around them, green and alive. They do not know how far they will have to walk today, or what lies beyond the next thick wall of hawthorn and earth. But as they step forward into the misty morning, they are not a scattered collection of frightened boys. They are a single, breathing entity, united by a quiet resilience and an unbreakable devotion. They walk softly through the damp grass, their footsteps a gentle rhythm against the earth, guided not by the grand sweeping currents of war, but by the simple, beautiful light of the men walking right beside them. There is a profound, aching stillness that settles over a flooded valley when the world holds its breath, leaving only the sound of dark water lapping against ancient stone. The Murderette River, usually a gentle, meandering ribbon of water that softly winds its way through the lush Norman countryside, has been transformed. It has spilled over its grassy banks, swallowing the low-lying meadows and orchards, turning the quiet farmland into a vast, silent, and unfamiliar lake. The tall, elegant poplar trees that once lined the country roads now stand waist-deep in the dark water, their silver leaves rustling softly in the night wind, like the hushed whispers of drowned ghosts. Cutting directly through the center of this vast, watery expanse is a narrow, elevated spine of earth and stone. This is the causeway at La Fere. And holding onto this slender thread of land, huddled together against the cold, are the paratroopers. They are so incredibly weary. It is a deep, bone-aching exhaustion that settles into the very marrow of a young man when he has not slept for days, when he has carried the heavy weight of the world on his shoulders without pause. Their canvas uniforms, once crisp and light, are now heavy and dark, soaked through with river water and the thick, clinging gray mud of the marsh. The mud is everywhere. It coats their boots, turning them into leaden weights. It smears across their cheeks and settles into the lines of their hands. The dampness seeps through their woolen shirts, chilling them in the cool night air. Yet, they do not leave. They kneel in the wet earth along the edge of the stone bridge, their shoulders pressing against the ancient, moss-covered masonry. They stare out across the dark, rippling water, listening to the gentle slapping of the current against the reeds. The causeway is a lonely place, a solitary finger of stone pointing into the unknown. But in this quiet, isolated darkness, these weary young men find a remarkable sanctuary. They find it not in the stone or the earth, but entirely within each other. If you were to walk softly down this line of kneeling boys, you would not see the fierce, unyielding faces of hardened warriors. You would see the soft, vulnerable faces of youth, painted with mud and exhaustion, illuminated only by the faint, silver glow of the starlight reflecting off the flooded river. And you would witness a beautiful, profound tapestry of small, quiet graces. In the shadow of a crumbling stone wall, near the edge of the water, two soldiers sit closely together. The boy from the bustling, crowded streets of Philadelphia reaches a trembling hand into his breast pocket. He carefully withdraws a small, waterproof pouch. Inside, preserved with the utmost care, is a single, slightly bent cigarette. It is a rare and precious treasure in this damp world. He places it gently between his lips, and his friend, a quiet farmer from the rolling hills of Ohio, strikes a match. The sound is a tiny, scratchy whisper in the dark. The match flares to life, a small, beautiful spark of warmth. The Ohio boy quickly cups his hands around the flame, hiding it from the open night, creating a tiny, private cavern of golden light. He leans close, bringing the sheltered flame to the tip of the paper. For a fleeting fraction of a second, the warm orange light illuminates their faces. You can see the dark circles beneath their eyes, the heavy droop of their eyelids, and the deep, unspoken gratitude in their expressions. The match is blown out, plunging them back into the velvety shadows, leaving only the tiny, glowing cherry of the tobacco. The boy from Philadelphia takes a slow, deep breath, letting the smoke fill his lungs, a familiar, grounding sensation that briefly chases away the smell of the stagnant marsh. He holds it for a moment, and then, without a word, he passes it to the boy from Ohio. The glowing ember moves gently between them in the dark, a silent pendulum of brotherhood. They share this small comfort exactly evenly, passing it back and forth until it is nothing more than ash. No words are spoken. The shared warmth, the simple act of giving half of all you have left to the man beside you, says more than 1,000 grand speeches ever could. Further down the line, moving with the slow, careful grace of a tired angel, is a medic. He carries a canvas bag slung across his shoulder, heavy with bandages and iodine, but his most powerful tools are his gentle hands and his soothing voice. He kneels in the muck beside a young soldier who is shivering uncontrollably, his clothes plastered to his skin by the icy river water. The medic does not rush. He unclasps his own dry woolen canteen cover and uses it to carefully, tenderly wipe the mud from the boy's face. His touch is light, almost maternal. He speaks in a voice that is barely more than a breath, a soft, steady murmur that blends with the rustling of the reeds. He asks the boy about his hometown. He asks him about his favorite kind of pie, about the name of his dog, about the girl whose picture is tucked safely in his helmet liner. He weaves a protective blanket of normalcy around the shivering soldier, drawing his mind away from the cold water of Normandy and transporting him back to a sunny kitchen in the Midwest. He unlaces the boy's sodden boots with incredible patience, massaging the cold, cramped muscles of his feet, wrapping them in a pair of dry, gray socks he had been saving in his own pack. It is an act of pure, selfless devotion. In the darkest hours of the night, this gentle medic is the keeper of their fragile spirits, tending to their hearts just as carefully as he tends to their bodies. As the night stretches on, the mind begins to wander, seeking refuge in memory. A paratrooper leans his head back against the stone bridge, staring up at the cloudy sky. The sound of the Murderette River flowing beneath the arches triggers a deep, distant memory. He closes his eyes and pictures a different river entirely. He sees the wide, sun-dappled surface of the Ohio River on a lazy July afternoon. He can almost feel the warm wooden planks of the dock beneath his bare feet. He remembers the smell of the sunscreen his mother used to rub on his shoulders, the sound of his father's gentle laughter as he cast a fishing line into the sparkling water. The memory is so vivid, so beautifully warm, that it brings a soft, solitary tear to his eye. It mixes with the river mist on his cheek. He sits in the dark and writes a letter in his mind. Dear Mother, he thinks, the words flowing silently like a calm stream. It is cold here, and there is so much water. But I am thinking of the summer. I am thinking of the way the sun looks when it sets over the back porch. I am keeping that light right here in my pocket. You do not need to worry about me. I am with good men. We are looking out for each other. He folds this invisible letter and tucks it away in his heart, a protective talisman to carry him through until the dawn. Just a few feet away, the silence of the night is broken by a soft, rhythmic whispering. It is a steady, murmuring cadence, like the rustle of dry leaves in the autumn wind. A soldier is kneeling in the mud, his hands clasped tightly together, a string of wooden rosary beads slipping slowly through his fingers. His eyes are closed, his brow resting against the cold stone of the bridge. He is praying. It is not a loud, desperate plea, but a quiet, rhythmic recitation of faith. Hail Mary, full of grace. The words pour from his lips in a continuous, soothing loop. The boy sitting next to him does not share the same faith. He has never held a rosary, has never learned the words to those ancient prayers. Yet, he scooches just a little bit closer in the mud. He finds a profound, sweeping comfort in the sound of his friend's voice. In a world that has been turned completely upside down, the steady, unwavering rhythm of the prayer is an anchor. It is a reminder that there is still hope, that there is still a quiet, gentle power in belief. The boy without a rosary simply closes his eyes and lets the whispered words wash over him, drawing immense strength from the quiet conviction of the man beside him. They are tethered together in the dark, held fast by the invisible threads of a shared humanity. Why do they stay? Why do they kneel in the freezing mud, shivering in their damp wool, refusing to yield a single inch of this lonely stone bridge? They do not stay for the road, or for the stone, or for the tactical maps drawn by men in warm rooms miles away. They stay for the simplest, most beautiful reason of all. They stay for each other. The boy from Philadelphia stays because he knows the boy from Ohio is relying on him. The boy from Ohio stays because the medic is there, watching over them all with his tired, gentle eyes. They have become the entire world to one another. To leave the bridge would be to leave a brother behind, and that is a thought entirely more terrifying than the dark water or the unknown shadows. They are bound together by a love that is stronger than fear, a love forged in shared exhaustion, shared water, and shared mud. Eventually, the great, heavy darkness of the night begins to relent. The sky above the flooded valley shifts from an impenetrable black to a soft, slate gray. A thick, silver mist begins to rise from the surface of the Murderette, swirling gently around the trunks of the drowned trees and creeping over the edges of the stone bridge. The birds of the marsh awaken. A single, sweet note trills from a hidden nest in the reeds, followed by another, and then another, until the misty air is filled with a soft, natural chorus. The light grows, turning the mist into a glowing, pearlescent blanket that wraps the world in a soft, ethereal beauty. The men at the bridge begin to stir. They stretch their aching, stiff limbs, moving with the slow caution of the deeply weary. They wipe the morning dew from their rifles and brush the drying mud from their sleeves. They look at one another in the soft, gray light of the dawn. Their faces are drawn, their eyes heavy with the weight of the sleepless night. But as they look down the line, seeing their brothers still kneeling beside them, still holding the causeway, a quiet, beautiful light returns to their expressions. A soft smile is shared. A hand reaches out to help a friend to his feet. A gentle pat on the shoulder says, "We made it. We are still here." The river continues to flow beneath the ancient stone arches, dark and indifferent. But the men standing upon it are not indifferent. They have faced the long, cold night, and they have held the line with nothing more than their quiet resilience and their profound devotion to one another. They stand together in the rising mist, bathed in the soft light of the morning, finding their strength, their courage, and their peace in the steady, unwavering presence of the friends standing right beside them. There is a rare and beautiful magic in a golden autumn afternoon, a suspended moment when the world seems entirely bathed in the gentle, amber light of a harvest sun. Descending into the golden afternoon light of Holland, the young men from the sky are met by grateful civilians offering apples and quiet smiles. A fleeting moment of warmth before the cold reality of a fading hope sets in. For these boys, the sky has always been a place of shadows and secrets. In the damp nights of the past, they had leaped into the inky blackness, guided only by the blind faith of their training and the whispered passwords of their friends. But today, the world has been entirely transformed. Today, they are flying in the broad, magnificent light of day. Inside the aircraft, the mood is startlingly different. The usual heavy, breathless tension of a midnight drop is replaced by a quiet, collective awe. The men sit by the small, thick windows, leaning their heads against the vibrating metal, simply watching the world pass beneath them. Below, the Netherlands is unrolled like a beautiful, intricately woven tapestry. It does not look like a landscape of conflict, it looks like a painting in a child's storybook. They see a patchwork quilt of perfectly square, emerald green fields, divided by the deep, reflective blue of winding canals. They see the long, sweeping arms of ancient windmills turning slowly in the autumn breeze. They see small, neat farmhouses with terracotta roofs, baking quietly in the afternoon sun. It is a Sunday. The air is clear and crisp, and the sky is a brilliant, endless blue. A young man from the crowded, noisy streets of a factory town rests his chin in his hand, mesmerized by the quiet beauty of it all. He has never seen anything so perfectly peaceful. Beside him, a farmer's son from the rolling plains of the Midwest recognizes the rich, dark look of the soil below. He smiles softly, feeling a sudden, deep kinship with the unseen farmers who tend those neat, geometric fields. For a few fragile hours, the heavy metal airplanes are not machines of war, they are simply vessels carrying them through a glorious, sunlit dream. When the doors are finally opened, the wind that rushes into the cabin does not carry the bitter chill of the sea or the damp bite of a midnight forest. It carries the sweet, dry scent of harvest time. It smells of dried hay, of turned earth, and of the faint, welcoming smoke of hearth fires. They step out into the brilliant light. To fall from the sky on a sunny afternoon is to experience a gentle, floating miracle. As the great silk canopies blossom above them, they are not the ghostly white shadows of the night drops. They are a sudden, breathtaking burst of color against the blue sky. Red, green, yellow, and white parachutes fill the air, thousands of them drifting on the wind like vibrant autumn leaves falling from an invisible, towering tree. Hanging suspended in the cool, crisp air, a paratrooper lets out a slow, wondering breath. The silence of the descent is beautiful. He can see for miles in every direction. He can see his brothers drifting down beside him, a vast, floating family sharing the exact same awe. They drift over the quiet canals, their colorful reflections gliding silently across the smooth water. They are umbrellas in the autumn sky, slowly lowering toward the waiting earth. The ground comes up to meet them softly. They land in fields of tall, dry grass and patches of dark, loamy soil. The earth gives way beneath their heavy boots, a gentle, welcoming embrace. They gather their silk canopies in the bright sunlight, the fabric warm against their hands. They expect to gather their weapons and creep into the shadows, as they have always done. But there are no shadows here. Instead, there is something entirely unexpected. There is the sound of footsteps running through the grass. From the edges of the fields, from the doorways of the neat brick farmhouses, the people of Holland are emerging. They do not approach with fear or caution. They come running, their faces alight with a joy so profound and desperate that it brings a sudden, heavy lump to the throats of the young soldiers. These are people who have waited in the quiet dark for years, nursing a fragile hope. And now, the hope has fallen directly into their backyards. An old man in worn, wooden clogs hurries across the uneven ground, tears streaming freely down the deep creases of his face. He reaches a young paratrooper from Texas, who is still untangling his heavy canvas harness. The old man does not speak a word of English, but he reaches out with two trembling, withered hands and gently grasps the soldier's shoulders. He pulls him close, resting his cheek against the rough wool of the boy's uniform, weeping with the quiet, overwhelming relief of a parent who has finally found a lost child. The soldier from Texas, who had braced himself for the harsh realities of the drop, simply lowers his hands and lets the old man hold him, patting his frail back in the golden light. From the farmhouses, women and children emerge carrying wicker baskets and wooden bowls. They have brought everything they have. They offer fresh milk in ceramic cups, passing them gently to the thirsty men. They bring out bread, baked secretly with hoarded flour. And they bring apples. A young Dutch girl, perhaps 7 years old, her blonde hair braided neatly down her back, steps shyly up to a soldier sitting in the grass. She holds out a single, perfectly ripe red apple. Her small hand is trembling, but her eyes are wide and entirely unafraid. She wears a small, bright orange ribbon pinned secretly to the inside of her collar, a quiet emblem of a resilient heart. The soldier takes the apple. His hands are large, smudged with dirt and oil, but he handles the fruit as if it were made of spun glass. He reaches into his own pockets, searching past his extra ammunition and his compass, and finds a small, slightly crushed piece of chocolate he had saved from his rations. He holds it out to her. Their fingers brush for just a second as they make the trade. It is a beautiful, silent exchange of two entirely different worlds, meeting in the middle of a sunlit field. The soldier bites into the apple. It is crisp, cold, and impossibly sweet. The juice runs over his tongue, tasting of sunshine and peaceful orchards. He closes his eyes. In that single, perfect bite, there is no war. There is no heavy pack waiting to be lifted. There is only the sweet taste of the earth and the beautiful innocence of the child standing before him. He will remember the taste of that apple for the rest of his life. For a few fleeting hours, the fields of Holland become a sanctuary. The soldiers sit along the stone walls and wooden fences, resting their tired backs, surrounded by the quiet hum of a grateful people. They communicate in smiles and nods and the shared language of gentle gestures. A soldier shows a local boy how his compass works, the boy's eyes wide with wonder. A woman carefully uses a clean cloth to wipe the dirt from a paratrooper's face, murmuring soft, soothing Dutch words that he cannot translate, but that he understands perfectly in his heart. A quiet boy from a rural town in Maine sits a little apart from the others, his notebook resting on his knee. He writes a letter to his parents, his pencil moving smoothly across the paper. "I wish you could see this place," he writes. "It is so beautiful here. The people treat us like we are their own sons. They gave us apples and milk. For a little while today, sitting in the sun, it felt like being back on the farm. It felt like everything was going to be perfectly fine." He tucks the letter into his pocket, keeping the warmth of the afternoon pressed close to his chest. But the autumn sun is a fleeting thing. As the afternoon wears on, the golden light begins to deepen into a heavy, bruised amber. The shadows of the tall poplar trees stretch out long and thin across the grass. The breeze that was so crisp and pleasant just hours ago begins to carry a sharper, deeper chill. The evening is coming. With the fading of the light comes the quiet, heartbreaking realization that this sanctuary cannot last. The men begin to stand up. They lace their heavy boots, testing the knots. They hoist their heavy canvas packs onto their shoulders, feeling the familiar, grounding weight settle against their spines. The brief, beautiful dream of the afternoon is ending, and the long, cold reality of the road ahead is waking up. The Dutch civilians sense the shift. The joyous chatter fades into a solemn, respectful silence. They gather at the edges of the dirt roads, their hands clasped tightly in front of them. The women pull their knitted shawls tighter around their shoulders against the creeping cold. They look at the faces of these young men, boys, really, who fell from the sky and brought the sun with them, and they know that many of them are walking into the dark. As the long line of paratroopers begins to march down the tree-lined avenue, stepping in time, the civilians do not cheer. They simply raise their hands in quiet, gentle waves. The old man who wept earlier stands by a wooden gate, his hand resting over his heart. The little girl with the braided hair watches the soldier who gave her the chocolate until he disappears around the bend in the road. The soldiers do not look back for long. They cannot. They must keep their eyes on the fading horizon. But as they march into the gathering dusk, as the autumn sky turns from blue to twilight purple, they carry the afternoon with them. The lingering sweetness of the apple, the warmth of the fresh milk, and the profound, beautiful grace of the quiet smiles are tucked safely away in their hearts. In the long, freezing nights that lie ahead of them, when the hope seems entirely lost and the world turns cold again, they will close their eyes and remember the golden light of Holland. They will remember that there is goodness in the world, a goodness so enduring that it can offer a perfect red apple in the middle of a storm. And that quiet, beautiful memory will be the gentle fire that keeps them warm, long after the autumn sun has set. There is a stillness in the heart of a deep winter forest that does not feel empty, but rather holds the quiet, sleeping breath of the entire world. In the ancient, snow-draped woods of the Ardennes, the world has been entirely swallowed by a sea of pure, unbroken white. The golden autumn afternoons and the warm Mediterranean breezes are now nothing more than distant, beautiful dreams. Here, winter has arrived with a hushed and heavy finality. The snow falls not in a flurry, but with a slow, hypnotic grace, massive flakes drifting down through the towering evergreens like millions of tiny, pale feathers. They settle onto the dark pine needles with a sound no louder than a sigh, slowly burying the earth, the trees, and the winding paths in a thick, glittering blanket of frost. The cold in this forest is a living, breathing thing. It does not simply chill the skin, it reaches deep into the bones, moving through the thin canvas of summer uniforms that these young men still wear. They had arrived with such suddenness, rushed into the frozen wilderness to hold the fragile line, leaving their heavy winter coats behind. They wear field jackets meant for the mild rains of spring, and leather boots that freeze solid when the temperature plummets beneath the silver light of the moon. Yet, in the face of this biting, crystalline cold, you will not hear loud complaints. You will not hear the sounds of panic. Instead, if you walk softly through the deep snowdrifts, you will hear the quietest, most profound testament to human endurance. You will hear the gentle, rhythmic hum of brotherhood. Beneath the heavy, snow-laden branches of a great fir tree, two young men sit pressed tightly together in a shallow hollow they have carved into the frozen earth. The dirt walls of their small sanctuary are hard as iron, glittering with tiny crystals of ice. They sit with their knees drawn to their chests, their shoulders overlapping, sharing every possible fraction of body heat. Draped over their trembling shoulders is a single, threadbare woolen blanket. It is rough and worn, smelling of damp earth and wood smoke, but in the freezing heart of the forest, it is their most treasured possession. The boy from the bustling, noisy avenues of Chicago tugs the corner of the blanket gently, making sure it covers the shivering shoulders of the boy sitting next to him, a quiet, soft-spoken farmhand from the endless, flat plains of Kansas. "Keep it close," the Chicago boy whispers, his breath forming a small, silvery cloud in the freezing air. The Kansas boy simply nods, leaning his head against his friend's shoulder. In this frozen, isolated world, they are no longer just soldiers, they are each other's survival. They are the only warmth left in the forest. To keep the terrible, creeping numbness at bay, they do not focus on the dark woods surrounding them. They close their eyes, and they let their minds travel backward, away from the snow, traveling the invisible tethers of memory back to the places where fires are burning in the hearth. It is December, and the scent of the pine trees heavily hanging in the air brings forth the bittersweet ghost of Christmas. "My mother," the boy from Chicago whispers, his voice a soft, melodic rumble in the quiet night, "she makes this peppermint candy every year. She boils the sugar on the stove until the windows fog up in the kitchen. The whole house smells like sugar and mint." He smiles softly, his eyes closed beneath his knitted cap. You can hear the crackle of the radiator. You can feel the warmth just standing in the hallway. The boy from Kansas listens, letting the image wrap around him like a second blanket. He can almost smell the peppermint. He can almost feel the gentle steam of that distant kitchen. "We never had much candy," the Kansas boy whispers back, his voice slow and heavy with exhaustion. "But my father would go out into the woods behind the barn and cut down a cedar tree. We'd drag it into the parlor, snow still clinging to the branches. My sisters would string popcorn and dry cranberries on a long thread to wrap around it. And we would sit by the fire, just listening to the wood pop and hiss. They trade these memories back and forth in the dark like precious, glowing embers. They build a fire entirely out of words. The memories are so vivid, so deeply loved, that they chase the freezing reality of the Ardennes into the shadows. They speak of the glow of colored lights in neighborhood windows, the sound of church choirs singing ancient carols in the crisp night air, the heavy, comforting weight of a quilt piled high on a childhood bed. In the sharing of these simple, beautiful things, their hearts find a profound, radiating warmth that the winter cannot touch. Down the line, in another shallow hollow beneath the snow, the quiet heroism of the everyday continues its beautiful work. A young soldier removes his freezing, stiff boots. His hands are clumsy and numb, his fingers pale and aching. He is trying to rub the life back into his frozen feet, a quiet panic beginning to flutter in his chest as he realizes he can no longer feel his toes. The man beside him, a slightly older soldier who used to repair watches in a quiet town in Pennsylvania, does not say a word. He simply sets down his rifle, unbuttons his own canvas jacket, and takes the boy's freezing feet, pulling them directly against his own warm chest. He wraps his coat around them, holding them tight against his own heartbeat. It is an act of pure, breathtaking selflessness. To invite the freezing cold into your own coat, to share your core warmth with another when you are already shivering, is a love so deep it defies the darkness of the world. They sit together in the silence, the watchmaker humming a very soft, unrecognizable tune, rocking gently until the boy's breath slows and the terrible shivering begins to ease. As the deepest, darkest hours of the night approach, the snow finally stops falling. The heavy clouds slowly part, tearing open like a dark curtain to reveal a brilliant, vast canopy of stars. The starlight reflects off the endless white snow, illuminating the forest in a soft, ethereal glow. The world looks like a beautiful, sleeping painting, painted entirely in shades of silver, pearl, and deep velvet shadows. In this delicate, glowing light, a soldier reaches into his pack and pulls out a small stub of a pencil and a piece of crumpled paper. His hands are shaking so badly he can barely grip the wood, but he writes anyway. He writes a letter to his young wife, who is sleeping in a warm bed thousands of miles across the dark ocean. He does not tell her about the ice on his collar, or the way his stomach aches from hunger. He does not write of the endless, numbing waiting. Instead, he writes of the beauty of the snow falling through the pine branches. He tells her that the stars tonight look exactly like the stars they used to watch from the hood of his car on summer evenings. I am safe, he writes, his pencil scratching softly against the paper. I am with good men, and we have a fire going. We are looking out for one another. Keep the porch light on for me. It is a gentle, protective lie, folded into a tiny square and tucked into a breast pocket to wait for the mail clerk. He protects her heart by carrying the burden of the truth entirely alone, finding strength in the very act of pretending he is warm. Eventually, exhaustion overtakes the shivering. The young men in the forest begin to drift into a fragile, necessary slumber. They lean against one another, their breathing synchronizing into a steady, collective rhythm. They are a patchwork quilt of brothers, stitched together by shared hardship and a quiet, stubborn resilience. The forest stands watch over them. The ancient evergreens, heavy with their burdens of snow, seem to bow down in silent reverence for the sleeping boys. The wind drops to a gentle, breathless whisper, rustling the uppermost branches like a mother hushing a restless child. They are far from the hearths and the peppermint candy. They are far from the popcorn strings and the glowing windows. But as they sleep, huddled together beneath the silver light of the stars, they are entirely surrounded by love. It is the love of the friend sharing a threadbare blanket. It is the love of the hands pressing frozen feet to a warm chest. It is the love of the whispered memories that keep the soul from freezing. The snow may cover their footprints by morning, erasing the physical marks of their journey through the woods. But the warmth they give to one another in the deep, silent cold will never fade. It is a gentle, eternal fire, burning quietly in the heart of the winter, promising that no matter how dark the night, or how deep the snow, they will carry each other through until the sun rises again. There is a sound more deafening than the loudest storm, and it is the sudden, sweeping arrival of absolute silence. As the Great War finally ends, the men cross a placid German river and are met by a surreal, overwhelming silence, left to quietly process the heavy cost of the peace they have won. For years, the world had been a symphony of thunder. Their lives had been measured by the roar of airplane engines, the rushing wind in the open doors of aircraft, the harsh crack of breaking branches in the night, and the endless, heavy trudge of boots against frozen earth. But today, the sky is clear, and the air is completely still. The river before them flows with a gentle, lazy grace, its surface acting as a perfect, undisturbed mirror reflecting the pale, beautiful blue of a quiet spring morning. They cross the water in small, wooden boats. There is no frantic shouting, no desperate paddling against the current. There is only the soft, rhythmic splash of the wooden oars dipping into the cool water, and the gentle lapping of the river against the sides of the vessels. The men sit with their hands resting loosely on their knees, their rifles lying quietly at their feet. They look around, their eyes wide and disbelieving. The banks of the river are green and lush, painted with the fragile, hopeful blossoms of early spring. When the bows of the boats softly touch the sandy shore, the men step out onto the grass. They do not run for cover. They do not crouch or hide in the shadows of the trees. For the first time in what feels like a lifetime, they stand completely upright. They stretch their aching backs, feeling the warm sun on their faces, pulling the crisp, clean air deep into their lungs. The air smells entirely different now. The sharp, metallic tang of conflict has vanished, replaced by the sweet, earthy perfume of damp soil, new leaves, and the gentle promise of a world waking up. But the body takes time to understand what the mind has been told. A young man from the bustling streets of a busy eastern city stands by the edge of the water, his hands trembling just a little. His shoulders are still coiled tight, bracing for a noise that will not come. He touches his own cheek, feeling the rough stubble, feeling the warmth of his own skin, as if to prove to himself that he is truly there. Beside him, an older soldier, a man who had been a quiet carpenter in a small, dusty town before the world turned upside down, sees the tremor in the younger boy's hands. He reaches out, placing a heavy, calloused hand on the boy's shoulder. His touch is warm, steady, and infinitely grounding. "It's over," the carpenter whispers, his voice cracking with an emotion too vast to name. "We don't have to run anymore." The young boy looks at him, the words washing over him like a warm wave, and slowly, gently, he lets out a breath he did not know he had been holding for years. He nods, closing his eyes, letting the tears fall freely. There is no shame in these tears. They are the beautiful, necessary release of a heart that has carried far too much weight for far too long. They move away from the river, finding a wide, sunlit meadow surrounded by ancient, protective oak trees. They unbuckle their heavy canvas webbing, letting the belts and pouches fall softly into the tall clover. They lay their helmets in the grass, turning them into small, olive-drab bowls catching the spring sunlight. In this new, breathtaking quiet, they sit in circles, simply looking at one another. They see the deep lines that have been carved around the eyes of boys who are still entirely too young to look so old. They see the gray dust of 1,000 miles woven into the very fabric of their uniforms. But they also see a profound, radiant beauty. They see the undeniable light of survival. Yet, as the afternoon stretches out, casting long, golden shadows across the meadow, the silence begins to feel heavy with the weight of memory. When a soldier from the rolling hills of Tennessee reaches into his pack to share a tin of biscuits, he instinctively breaks off a piece for the man who used to sleep in the cot beside him. He holds the biscuit out, his hand hovering in the empty air, before he remembers. He remembers a dark hedgerow in Normandy. He remembers a frozen hollow in the Ardennes. He remembers a wind-tossed night over the Mediterranean Sea. He slowly lowers his hand, resting the piece of biscuit on his own knee. He does not cry out. He simply looks down at the grass, a gentle, sorrowful smile touching his lips. He places the small piece of food on the earth, a quiet offering to the ghosts of his youth. The grief they feel in this tranquil meadow is not a sharp, violent pain. It is a slow, deep ache, softened by the beauty of the day. They sit together in the sun, wrapping their arms around their knees, holding the memories of their fallen brothers in the quiet sanctuary of their hearts. They know that the peace they are breathing in was purchased with the unseen, unheard sacrifices of the boys who did not cross the river with them. As the sun begins its slow descent, dipping below the canopy of the oaks, the evening air turns cool. For the first time, they do not need to hide their warmth. They gather dry branches and fallen leaves, building a bright, crackling campfire right in the center of the open meadow. The flames leap upward, dancing cheerfully in the twilight, painting their weary faces with a soft, golden glow. The firelight is a beautiful, hypnotic thing. It is a beacon of safety, a warm hearth in the middle of a foreign land. They unlace their heavy leather boots, groaning softly as the pressure is finally released from their tired feet. They hold their hands out to the flames, feeling the heat seep into their bones, melting away the lingering chill of 100 cold nights. A soldier sitting near the edge of the firelight pulls a small, worn leather journal from his pocket. The binding is coming undone, the pages softened by rain and the sweat of his own hands. He opens it to the very last blank page. He takes a stub of a pencil, finding the familiar groove where his thumb has rested countless times before. He is writing a letter to his wife, who waits in a small farmhouse surrounded by fields of tall, whispering wheat. Over the years, he has written to her of the weather, of the stars, of the small kindnesses of strangers. He has written to protect her from the dark. But tonight, the words flow differently. Tonight, the pencil glides over the paper with a lightness he has never known. "My darling," he writes, the letters forming gracefully in the dim light. "The thunder has finally stopped. I am sitting by a warm fire, and the world is entirely quiet. I am safe. We are all safe now. You do not need to leave the porch light on to guide me through the dark anymore. I am finally coming home to you." He folds the letter carefully, running his thumb over the crease. It is not just a piece of paper, it is a bridge built of hope, stretching across the ocean, leading directly to the front door of the life he left behind. Around the campfire, voices begin to murmur. They are low, rhythmic whispers, blending perfectly with the crackle of the burning wood. They are no longer talking about the miles they have to march or the shadows they must navigate. They are talking about tomorrow. A boy from the Midwest talks about the smell of fresh hay in the summer, and how he plans to sleep for 3 whole days in his own bed. A tailor from the city talks about the sound of the elevated train rattling past his apartment window, a sound he once hated but now misses with a fierce, beautiful ache. They are weaving their dreams back together, thread by thread, reclaiming the simple, ordinary lives they had paused so long ago. When the fire burns down to soft, glowing embers, the men wrap themselves in their woolen blankets. They lie back against the soft spring earth, resting their heads on their canvas packs. They look up at the sky. It is a vast, sweeping canvas of deep indigo, dusted with millions of brilliant, twinkling stars. In the past, the night sky had been a map, a place to look for navigation, a place to hide their falling silk. But tonight, the sky is just the sky. The stars are simply beautiful lights, shining gently over a quiet world. The river flows steadily in the distance, a soft, eternal lullaby washing against the shore. The night breeze rustles the new leaves of the oak trees, a gentle shushing sound that whispers of rest and renewal. The tension of the years finally drains entirely from their muscles, sinking away into the earth below them. They close their eyes, surrounded by the warm, steady breathing of their brothers. They have walked through the deepest shadows, they have fallen from the freezing skies, and they have held on to each other through the darkest of nights. Now, in the soft, beautiful quiet after the thunder, they simply surrender to sleep, cradled by the gentle peace they have finally found. There is a heat so heavy and profound that it feels as though the sky itself has wrapped you in a warm, damp blanket. Decades have slipped away like water over smooth stones since the quiet meadows of Germany, and the world has turned on its great, slow axis. Now, a new generation of young men breathes the heavy, humid air of Vietnam. They are the younger brothers, the sons, and the nephews of those who once fell from the cold night skies over Europe. They wear different uniforms, and the great metal birds that carried them here hover with a deafening, rhythmic thrumming of blades rather than the steady drone of propellers. Yet, as they step off the ramps and their boots touch the soft, yielding earth, the hearts beating within their chests are exactly the same. They are young, they are impossibly far from home, and they are stepping together into a vast and unfamiliar world. This world is an endless, breathtaking ocean of green. It is an ancient, living jumble that breathes and sighs with a life entirely its own. The canopy above them is a dense, tangled weave of towering mahogany trees, broad banana leaves, and thick, winding vines that reach up to swallow the sky. The sunlight does not beat down harshly here. Instead, it is filtered through millions of leaves, drifting down to the forest floor in slow, hazy shafts of golden green light. The air is thick with the sweet, heavy perfume of crushed ferns, blooming orchids, and the rich, dark scent of the damp earth. And then there is the dirt. It is a striking, vibrant red. It rises in a fine, powdery mist when the sun is high, and it turns into a thick, clinging clay when the afternoon monsoons sweep across the hills. This red dust settles over everything. It coats the tops of their dark leather boots, it dusts the sleeves of their olive green fatigues, and it settles into the fine lines of their tired, youthful faces. It is as if the landscape itself is reaching out to mark them, to fold them softly into its ancient embrace. Walking through this dense, tropical labyrinth requires a slow, deliberate grace. The men move in a long, quiet line, their footfalls muffled by the thick carpet of decaying leaves and soft moss. The weight they carry on their backs is immense, heavy canvas rucksacks filled with every single thing they need to survive. The heat presses down on their shoulders, a constant, physical presence that makes every step a quiet act of endurance. But it is precisely here, in the heart of this exhausting heat, that the most beautiful moments of human kindness begin to bloom. A young boy from the cool, misty coastline of Oregon finds himself struggling to catch his breath in the stifling humidity. His shoulders slump, and his steps begin to falter. He does not ask for help, the pride of youth keeps his lips tightly sealed. But the man walking directly behind him, a tall, quiet soldier from the sweltering bayous of Louisiana, sees the heavy rise and fall of his friend's chest. Without a single word, the boy from Louisiana steps forward. He reaches out and gently unclips a heavy, metal ammunition tin from the Oregon boy's pack, transferring the heavy burden to his own weary shoulders. The boy from Oregon turns, his eyes wide with a silent, profound gratitude. The boy from Louisiana simply offers a soft, knowing smile, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "I've got you," the smile says. "We share the weight. That is how we make it through." It is a microscopic moment, a fleeting exchange in the vastness of the jungle, but it is a gesture of such pure, unconditional love that it transforms the oppressive heat into something entirely bearable. When the day finally begins to wane, the intense, golden light softens into a bruised, purple twilight. The shadows of the great trees stretch out, wrapping the forest floor in a cool, forgiving dusk. The men come to a halt, slipping their heavy packs from their aching shoulders with deep, collective sighs of relief. They settle into the red dirt, leaning their tired backs against the wide, mossy trunks of the ancient trees. This is the sanctuary of the evening. This is the quiet hour. A paratrooper unhooks his plastic canteen from his web belt. The water inside is warm, tasting faintly of iodine and plastic, but as it washes over his dry throat, it is an absolute blessing. He takes only a small sip, and then passes it to the man sitting beside him. In this strange, beautiful jungle, everything is shared. A half-melted piece of chocolate, a dry pair of green socks, a quiet joke murmured in the gathering dark, these small, simple things are the currency of their brotherhood. As the light begins to fade, a profound hush falls over the young men. They reach into the deep pockets of their trousers, carefully withdrawing small, waterproof plastic bags. Inside these bags are their most treasured, fragile possessions, a few sheets of thin writing paper, a blue ink pen, and the folded, creased letters they have received from home. Sitting in the red dirt, bathed in the fading, tropical twilight, they begin to write. To watch a soldier write a letter in the jungle is to witness a quiet, sacred ritual. Their hands, calloused from digging in the earth and gripping the heavy metal of their tools, move across the paper with a delicate, trembling tenderness. They are surrounded by a world that is loud with the sounds of unfamiliar insects and the distant calls of exotic birds, but in their minds, they are sitting on a quiet front porch in Ohio, or at a kitchen table in a crowded Brooklyn apartment. A boy with dirt smudged across his cheek writes a letter to his mother. He does not tell her about the heavy rains or the suffocating heat. He does not want to place the burden of his reality into her gentle hands. Instead, he writes about a beautiful, massive blue butterfly that landed softly on his sleeve that morning. He tells her that the green of the trees reminds him of the oak tree in their front yard during the peak of summer. He writes, in slow, careful cursive, that he is eating well, that his friends are looking out for him, and that she should not worry her heart. A few yards away, leaning against a wall of sandbags, a young man writes to a father who once jumped into the snowy darkness of Normandy. He writes to tell his father that he finally understands. He understands the quietness that always settled over his dad on certain winter nights. He understands the profound, unbreakable tether that binds men together when they have nothing left but each other. I have found them too, Dad, he writes, a single tear mixing with the sweat on his face. I have found the brothers you always talked about. They are right here in the dirt with me. The envelopes are sealed, holding entirely different worlds within their thin paper walls. They are collected in the dark, passed gently from hand to hand until they reach the canvas bag of the mail clerk, ready to begin their long, miraculous journey across the ocean. With the letters finished, the night takes full possession of the jungle. It is a darkness so complete, so absolute, that opening your eyes feels no different than keeping them closed. The canopy above blocks out the moon and the stars, leaving the men entirely wrapped in a warm, velvety blackness. The jungle comes alive with a new symphony of sounds. The rhythmic, hypnotic hum of millions of cicadas swells into a sweeping chorus. The leaves rustle softly in the night breeze, a gentle shushing sound that mimics the ocean. To a stranger, the absolute dark might be terrifying. But to these boys, lying shoulder to shoulder on the soft earth, it is a protective blanket. A soldier lies on his back, staring up into the unseen canopy. He feels the damp warmth of the tropical air resting softly against his skin. A sudden, deep pang of loneliness tries to creep into his chest, a yearning for the cool air conditioning of a movie theater, the clinking of ice in a glass, the familiar voice of his sweetheart calling his name. But then, he hears a quiet shifting in the dark nearby. He sees the incredibly faint, green glow of a watch dial suspended in the blackness. It is the man on watch. The sentry sits perfectly still, a silent guardian sitting awake so that the others might rest. The soldier looking at the glowing dial lets out a slow, steady breath. The loneliness instantly recedes, washed away by a wave of profound comfort. He is entirely safe. He is surrounded by a ring of quiet devotion. He reaches out a hand in the dark, his fingertips brushing against the rough canvas of his friend's pack lying next to him, anchoring himself to the present. The rain begins to fall. It is not a violent storm, but a soft, steady midnight shower. The raindrops patter gently against the broad, green leaves of the canopy high above, a continuous, soothing whisper that filters down through the branches. It sounds like 1,000 soft voices murmuring a lullaby. The young men pull their lightweight ponchos over themselves, wrapping up in their own small, dry cocoons. They close their eyes, letting the rhythmic sound of the tropical rain wash over them. They have walked through the red dust, they have carried the heavy burdens of the day, and they have poured their hearts onto paper. Now, beneath the strange, beautiful canopy of a foreign land, they find the same timeless, unshakable peace that their fathers once found. They drift softly into sleep, cradled in the damp earth, surrounded entirely by the quiet, whispering love of the brothers resting beside them. There is a strange, suspended magic in the deep, quiet hours of the night, a time when a sudden awakening feels less like breaking a slumber and more like slipping gently into a different kind of dream. For the young men and women sleeping soundly in the quiet, pine-scented neighborhoods of their home post, the night is a blanket of profound peace. The streets are entirely empty, bathed in the soft, yellow glow of street lamps. Inside the small houses, there is only the rhythmic, soothing sound of breathing. A soldier lies in a warm bed, one arm draped protectively across his sleeping wife. In the room down the narrow hallway, a child is tangled in soft cotton sheets, dreaming of ordinary, beautiful things. And then, the telephone rings. It is a sharp, sudden sound in the dark, but it is answered with practiced, quiet speed. The soldier untangles himself from the warm blankets, his bare feet touching the cool wooden floorboards. He speaks in a voice that is barely a whisper, a soft murmur of understanding into the plastic receiver. He gently sets the phone down. There is no panic in his movements. There is only a slow, deliberate shift from the sanctuary of home to the heavy reality of duty. His wife stirs in the dim light of the bedroom. She does not ask where he is going, for he does not know. She simply watches him as he moves to the closet, pulling on the stiff, patterned fabric of his uniform. The familiar, comforting smell of laundry soap gives way to the scent of polished leather and canvas. He leans over the bed, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her forehead. "I have to go," he whispers, his breath warm against her cheek. "Lock the door. I will be back." He pauses in the doorway of his child's room, watching the small chest rise and fall in the gentle shadows. He leaves a piece of his heart hovering perfectly still over that small bed, a silent promise to return. And then, he steps out into the cool, dark air of the night, leaving the warm yellow light of his front porch behind. They gather under the vast, sweeping floodlights of the airfield, hundreds of young men and women emerging from the dark like quiet shadows. They are surrounded by a surreal, dreamlike blur. They move with a synchronized grace, helping each other lift the impossibly heavy canvas rucksacks onto tired shoulders. The air is crisp, carrying the faint, earthy chill of a late autumn night, and their breath plumps in soft white clouds as they stand in long, orderly lines. Someone produces a silver thermos from a deep pocket, unscrewing the cup and pouring a small, steaming measure of coffee. It is passed down the line, a tiny, shared warmth in the chill of the tarmac. The metal cup touches the lips of a boy from the snowy mountains of Colorado, and then a quiet, soft-spoken mechanic from the crowded avenues of Chicago. In this surreal, middle-of-the-night gathering, the coffee tastes like a profound and beautiful brotherhood. They do not know what hemisphere they are flying toward. They only know they are going together. They climb into the cavernous belly of the great transport planes, sitting shoulder to shoulder on the long, woven benches. As the massive engines roar to life, a deep, vibrating hum settles into their bones. It is a constant, heavy lullaby that entirely drowns out the anxious thoughts of the mind. The cabin is dim, lit only by small, red bulbs that cast a warm, crimson glow over their painted faces. A young soldier rests his head against the vibrating hull of the aircraft. He reaches into the pocket over his heart, his fingertips brushing against the folded paper of a letter he had written just hours before, but had not had the time to mail. It is a letter to his mother, telling her about his new car, about the weather, about the mundane, beautiful details of a life he has suddenly been pulled away from. He holds the letter tight, letting the physical touch of the paper ground him in the chaotic blur of the flight. The man sitting next to him, an older squad leader with deep, kind lines etched around his eyes, sees the young boy's white-knuckled grip on his pocket. The older man leans over, the heavy canvas of their gear rustling together. He doesn't say a word. He simply reaches out and rests his heavy, calloused hand over the young boy's hand. He gives a soft, reassuring squeeze. "You are not alone," the touch says. "I am right here." The young soldier takes a slow, deep breath, his grip relaxing, his heart quieting in the dim red light. When the heavy doors of the aircraft finally open, the world has entirely changed. The cold, crisp air of their home is gone, entirely vanished. Instead, the wind that rushes into the cabin carries the thick, humid breath of the tropics. It is a sudden, invisible wall of heat, smelling of rich, dark earth, blooming hibiscus, and the heavy, salty tang of a warm ocean. It is the scent of the Caribbean. It is the breath of Grenada and Panama, islands of lush, tangled beauty waiting far beneath the dark sky. They step out into the rushing wind, tumbling into the warm, velvet blackness of a tropical night. As their parachutes blossom like great, dark flowers against the stars, they drift down into a landscape that feels entirely like a beautiful, terrifying illusion. Below them, the moonlight reflects off the broad, waxy leaves of banana trees and the swaying, elegant fronds of ancient palms. They can hear the rhythmic, eternal crashing of the ocean waves against a sandy shore, a sound so deeply associated with peace and vacation, yet now serving as the soundtrack to their descent. They land in the tall, wet elephant grass, the humid air instantly wrapping around them like a heavy, damp towel. The red dirt of the tropics clings to their boots. In the dense, chaotic underbrush, the world is a maze of shadows and strange, exotic sounds. The hypnotic, pulsating chorus of tree frogs and the rustle of massive insects replace the familiar quiet of their own backyards. In this suffocating, disorienting heat, the quiet heroism of the everyday blooms brilliantly. A soldier kneels in the thick mud, entirely exhausted, the sweat stinging his eyes. He reaches for his canteen, only to find the cap is hopelessly jammed with grit. His hands are shaking with adrenaline, unable to twist it free. The shadow next to him shifts. His friend simply reaches over, taking the canteen from his trembling hands. With a quiet, steady strength, he twists the cap loose, wiping the rim clean with a relatively dry corner of his own sleeve. He hands it back, offering a soft, unseen smile in the dark. The water is tepid, tasting of plastic in the sweet, heavy air of the island, but as it washes down the exhausted boy's throat, it is an absolute miracle. It is the taste of pure grace. They sit together in the tropical night, leaning against the wide, smooth trunks of the palm trees, their heavy weapons resting across their laps. They share the silence, entirely tethered to one another in the dark. They watch the fireflies dancing in the dense foliage, beautiful, glowing sparks that remind them of summer evenings catching lightning bugs in a glass jar. They find a profound, sweeping comfort in these small, familiar things, anchoring their floating hearts to the earth. But the most surreal part of this tropical journey is not the sudden departure, nor the heavy, fragrant heat. It is the breathtaking suddenness of the return. Before the tropical dirt has even fully settled into the creases of their boots, the great metal plains are waiting for them once again. The mission is swift, a sudden storm that blows through the islands and then rapidly dissipates, leaving the whispering palms to sway in the ocean breeze once more. They climb back into the belly of the aircraft, their uniforms stained with red clay and dark sweat. They do not talk. They are entirely consumed by a deep, bone-aching exhaustion. They lay down on the hard metal floor plates of the cabin, resting their heads on their empty canvas packs, and they sleep the profound, dreamless sleep of those who have poured out every ounce of their strength. When they wake, the heavy, vibrating hum of the engines begins to change pitch. The plane is descending. They step off the ramp, and the air that greets them is shockingly cool. The thick, suffocating humidity of the tropics is gone, replaced by the crisp, clean scent of the pine trees they had left behind just days ago. It feels as though they have stepped out of a strange, feverish dream and back into the waking world. They return their weapons, they stow their heavy gear, and then, they simply walk away. A young soldier walks slowly up the driveway of his small house in the early evening light. The neighborhood is exactly as he left it. The street lamps are just beginning to flicker on, casting their familiar yellow glow over the quiet lawns. The world here did not stop, it simply waited for him. He climbs the wooden steps of his porch. His hand trembles just a little as he turns the brass doorknob. He steps inside, the hinges squeaking softly in the quiet house. From the kitchen, he hears the beautiful, ordinary sound of water running in the sink. He walks down the short hallway, the red dust of the tropics still clinging faintly to the hems of his trousers, a silent ghost of the world he just left. His wife turns from the sink. For a fraction of a second, she freezes, her eyes wide with disbelief. And then, she crosses the room in a breath. The embrace is a quiet, desperate collision of two hearts. He buries his face in her shoulder, breathing in the scent of her hair, the smell of laundry soap and home. He closes his eyes, and the heavy, terrifying blur of the midnight deployment entirely washes away. The humid breath of the jungle, the roar of the engines, the strange stars of the southern sky, they all fade into a distant, harmless memory. He walks into his child's room, watching the small chest rise and fall in the gentle shadows, entirely unchanged from the night he left. He rests his hand on the wooden edge of the crib, letting the profound, absolute relief wash over him. He is home. The midnight in the tropics was a sudden, surreal storm, but he has navigated the dark, guided by the quiet devotion of his brothers, and he has returned perfectly safe to the familiar arms of his family. He lies down in his own soft bed, pulling the warm quilt over his tired shoulders, and surrenders to a beautiful, undisturbed peace, cradled by the gentle lullaby of the life he loves so dearly. There is a silence in the deep desert that is so profound it feels almost like a physical weight, a quiet that stretches out until it touches the very edge of the world. Surrounded by the vast, oceanic emptiness of the Arabian desert, young men and women sit in the cool night air, overwhelmed by the beauty of a sky unbothered by city lights. They have traded the damp, green forests and the familiar, winding roads of their youth for a landscape that looks entirely like the surface of another planet. It is a world made only of two things, the endless, rolling earth beneath them, and the vast, sweeping sky above. During the day, this ocean of sand is a blinding, sun-bleached expanse. The heat is a brilliant, shimmering curtain that distorts the horizon, making the dunes look like slow, moving waves. The sand itself is a marvel, as fine as powdered sugar. It moves with a mind of its own, slipping through tightly laced boots, coating the canvas of their tents, and settling like a pale dusting of snow on their eyelashes. They walk across this ancient seabed with a slow, deliberate rhythm, learning to navigate the shifting earth that gives way beneath every step. But as the afternoon finally surrenders, the desert undergoes a breathtaking transformation. The fierce, white glare of the sun begins to soften, melting into deep, heavy shades of crushed copper and burnished gold. The shadows of the dunes stretch out for miles, carving the landscape into beautiful, sweeping crescents of light and dark. And then, the heat simply vanishes. It rises up into the atmosphere, leaving behind a sudden, pristine chill that settles over the encampment like a cool, gentle breath. The young men and women, clad in their pale, sand-colored uniforms, welcome this twilight with a profound, collective sigh. The evening is their sanctuary. It is the time when the harshness of the day is folded away, and the gentle, human rhythms of the camp come to life. They sit on the edges of their canvas cots, pulling heavy, olive-green fleece jackets over their shoulders to ward off the creeping cold. The desert night is remarkably crisp. The air smells entirely empty, devoid of the familiar scents of pine trees, wet asphalt, or growing things. It is a clean, ancient smell, smelling only of dust and the cooling earth. In the center of a small cluster of tents, a gentle, everyday heroism unfolds in the form of a shared comfort. A young woman from a damp, rainy town in the Pacific Northwest kneels in the sand, carefully shielding the tiny blue flame of a small, portable stove from the evening breeze. She watches a small metal canteen cup of water as it slowly begins to bubble. From her pocket, she produces a rare, treasured prize, a single packet of instant hot chocolate, sent in a care package from her mother weeks ago. She pours the dark powder into the water, stirring it carefully with a metal spoon. The sweet, rich aroma rises into the cold air, a scent so deeply out of place in the barren desert that it feels almost like magic. It smells of childhood winters, of snow days, and of warm kitchens. She does not drink it alone. She carefully pours half of the steaming, sweet liquid into a second cup, turning to the young man sitting quietly beside her. He is a mechanic from the crowded, noisy streets of a sprawling city, and his hands are permanently stained with the dark grease of the heavy trucks he repairs. He looks entirely exhausted, the pale dust turning his dark hair gray. She hands him the warm metal cup without a word. He takes it, his rough hands wrapping around the heat, and he closes his eyes as the steam washes over his face. They sit side by side in the sand, sipping the sweet chocolate in the gathering dark. It is a microscopic moment of profound grace. In the middle of an ocean of nothingness, they have created a tiny, warm island of home. They share the silence, entirely tethered together by the simple act of looking out for one another. As the deep purple of the twilight bruises into a true, velvety black, the camp settles into a soft, murmuring hush. Small, red-lensed flashlights click on inside the tents, casting a warm, crimson glow through the canvas. This is the hour of letters. A young soldier lies on his stomach on his cot, his notebook resting on his sleeping bag. The red light washes over the thin paper as his pen moves in slow, careful loops. He is writing to his grandfather, a man who once carried a heavy rifle through the snows of Europe so many decades before. He wants to explain this vast, quiet emptiness to someone who understands the waiting. "It is so quiet here," he writes, his pencil scratching softly. "You can hear the wind moving the sand for miles. It feels like we are waiting at the end of the world. But I am not afraid. I have good people beside me. We talk about the things we miss. We talk about the rain. You would not believe how much a person can miss the simple sound of rain on a roof. I hope you are sitting in your favorite chair, Grandpa. I am keeping your stories close to my heart." He folds the paper, slipping it into an envelope that is already slightly warped by the dry heat. He presses it to his chest for just a moment, sending a quiet wish across the thousands of miles of ocean and land, trusting that the love inside the envelope will somehow transcend the distance. Outside the tents, the wind drops entirely. The desert becomes as still as a frozen sea. A young woman steps out into the night, pulling her fleece collar up around her neck. She walks a few paces away from the camp, away from the soft red lights and the murmured conversations, until she is standing alone in the soft sand. She tilts her head back, and her breath catches softly in her throat. Without the haze of moisture in the air, without the towering trees or the bright, artificial glow of city lights, the desert sky is an absolute revelation. It is not just a black canopy dotted with pinpricks of light. It is a sweeping, three-dimensional tapestry of unimaginable depth and staggering beauty. The stars are so thick, so brilliantly bright, that they seem to overlap and crowd together. The Milky Way stretches directly overhead, a luminous, glowing river of diamond dust pouring across the heavens. It is entirely overwhelming. Standing beneath that vast, glittering dome, it is easy to feel incredibly small. It is easy to feel like a single grain of sand on a limitless dune. But as she stands there, her face bathed in the faint, silver light of a million distant suns, she does not feel insignificant. She feels a sudden, profound connection to the entire earth. She realizes that the very same stars looking down on this quiet, ancient desert are currently shining their gentle light over her home. She imagines the North Star, bright and steady, hanging over the small, brick house where her family sleeps. She imagines the moonlight falling across the familiar lawns of her neighborhood, illuminating the empty streets of the town she loves so fiercely. The sky is the great equalizer, the beautiful, sweeping blanket that covers everyone she has ever loved. A shadow moves softly in the dark nearby. It is another soldier, a young man from a quiet farming town, his eyes also fixed entirely on the heavens. He steps up beside her, their shoulders almost touching in the cool night air. They do not look at each other. They simply look up, sharing the breathtaking awe. "I've never seen so many," he whispers, his voice barely louder than the beating of his own heart. "It makes you feel like you could reach up and touch them," she whispers back. They stand together in the silent sand, two small figures wrapped in the overwhelming beauty of the universe. The anticipation of what tomorrow might bring, the heavy reality of the miles they have traveled, all of it simply falls away. It is replaced by a sweeping, profound peace. Every now and then, a shooting star streaks across the dark canvas, a bright, sudden flare that vanishes as quickly as it appears. They do not point them out, they simply witness them together in companionable silence. They are a family forged in the dust and the cold night air, bound by a shared sense of duty and a quiet, stubborn resilience. Eventually, the deep chill of the night encourages them to return to their tents. They walk softly back toward the red-lit canvas, their boots sinking silently into the cool, forgiving earth. They slip into their sleeping bags, fully clothed, seeking the warmth of their own bodies. The camp sleeps. The quiet of the Arabian desert wraps entirely around them, a protective, ancient embrace. The wind begins to whisper once again, sweeping softly over the tops of the dunes, continuously reshaping the world while they rest. But the young men and women lying in the dark carry the brilliant light of the stars with them into their dreams. They have found a profound beauty in the emptiness. They have found the sweet taste of cocoa in the bitter cold, the warmth of a letter in the barren dust, and the steady, unwavering presence of a friend in the deepest dark. They sleep in the sea of silent sand, entirely surrounded by love, gathering their quiet strength for whatever the morning sun will illuminate on the horizon. There is a profound, echoing stillness that lives only at the very top of the world, where the air grows thin and the stars feel close enough to touch. High in the cold, thin air of the Afghan mountains, soldiers stand the long, lonely night watch, drinking instant coffee and listening to the wind carry echoes across the ancient valleys. To climb into these mountains is to leave the familiar world entirely behind. This is a landscape carved by deep, unfathomable time. The peaks of the Hindu Kush rise up like the jagged spines of sleeping giants, their slopes a beautiful, treacherous tapestry of loose shale, pale dust, and ancient, unyielding stone. There are no soft, rolling green hills here. There are no gentle, winding rivers to guide the way. There is only the vast, vertical earth, reaching desperately upward into a sky of breathtaking clarity. During the day, the sun beats down with a blinding, white-hot intensity, baking the dust and reflecting off the sheer rock faces. But as the sun slips behind the jagged horizon, the warmth is instantly snatched away. The temperature plummets, and a deep, biting cold rushes in to fill the valleys. It is a cold that does not merely sit upon the skin, it reaches through the heavy layers of fleece and thick canvas, seeking the very bones. On a narrow, rocky outcropping high above a shadowed pass, a small outpost sits wrapped in the absolute dark. The men inside the protective walls of earth and stone are sleeping, wrapped tightly in their heavy sleeping bags, breathing the thin, freezing air in slow, rhythmic clouds. But not everyone is sleeping. Along the perimeter, standing behind a low wall of sandbags, two young soldiers are keeping the watch. They are the silent guardians of the night. They stand shoulder to shoulder, entirely swallowed by the vast, imposing darkness of the mountain pass. The boy on the left comes from the deep, green valleys of Appalachia, a place where the mountains are soft and rounded by time, covered in thick blankets of oak and pine. The boy on the right is a mechanic from the flat, endless plains of Texas, a young man who had never seen a mountain at all until he stepped off an airplane thousands of miles from home. They wear heavy armor and thick winter coats, their shoulders burdened by the weight of their duty. Yet, their movements are slow, deliberate, and incredibly gentle. They speak in voices that are barely more than a breath, knowing that in these high, rocky corridors, sound carries for miles. The wind is their constant, murmuring companion. It sweeps through the narrow valleys and rushes over the jagged peaks, creating a continuous, mournful whisper. It whistles softly through the small gaps in the sandbags. It sounds like the rush of a distant ocean, or the hushed voices of the ancient travelers who walked these very same paths centuries ago. The soldiers listen to the echoes rolling across the valley, a hypnotic, beautiful lullaby that makes them feel incredibly small, yet profoundly connected to the sprawling history of the earth. To fend off the creeping numbness of the deep night, they engage in a quiet, sacred ritual. The boy from Appalachia reaches into a heavy pouch and withdraws a small, dented metal cup and a tiny, portable stove. He moves with practiced, loving care, sheltering the stove with his gloved hands as he strikes a spark. A tiny, beautiful ring of blue flame hisses to life. In the vast, freezing blackness of the mountain, that small flame is a miraculous beacon of warmth. He sets the metal cup over the fire, watching as the precious water slowly begins to steam. From his breast pocket, he pulls a small, foil packet of instant coffee. It is not the rich, freshly roasted coffee of the cafes back home. It is bitter and harsh, but as he pours the dark powder into the steaming water, the aroma that rises into the thin air is absolutely divine. It smells of warm kitchens and early mornings. It smells of survival. He carefully turns off the stove, preserving the fuel, and wraps his thick gloves around the warm metal cup. He holds it beneath his nose, closing his eyes and letting the fragrant steam wash over his freezing face. Then, without a word, he passes the cup to the boy from Texas. The Texan takes the cup, feeling the heat instantly seep through the fabric of his gloves and into his aching fingers. He takes a slow, careful sip. The dark liquid burns beautifully on the way down, chasing the chill from his chest. He exhales a long, white cloud of breath, offering a soft, unseen smile in the dark. Tastes like a five-star restaurant, the Texan whispers, his voice rough with exhaustion. Only the best for the midnight watch, the Appalachian boy whispers back. They share the cup, passing it back and forth in the cold night air, taking tiny sips to make the warmth last as long as possible. It is a simple, everyday act, but here, suspended between the jagged rocks and the starlit sky, it is a profound gesture of brotherhood. They are tethered to one another by the shared cold, the shared silence, and the shared comfort of a battered tin cup. As the hours stretch out, long and unbroken, the mind begins to wander, seeking refuge from the biting wind. The young man from Texas reaches inside his heavy coat, his fingers finding the smooth, familiar texture of a folded piece of paper tucked securely in his chest pocket. It is a letter from his young wife. He cannot read it in the dark. He does not need to. He has read it so many times by the faint, red glow of his flashlight that he has memorized every single curve of her handwriting. He rests his hand over the pocket, letting the physical presence of the letter anchor him. He closes his eyes and pictures her sitting on the worn, fabric sofa in their small living room. He imagines the soft, yellow light of the reading lamp illuminating her hair. He imagines the quiet, steady ticking of the clock on the wall, a sound so safe and predictable, standing in stark contrast to the wild, echoing wind of the Hindu Kush. He remembers the smell of her favorite lotion, the sound of her gentle laugh, the warmth of her hand resting in his. He writes her a letter in his mind, his thoughts flowing as smoothly as ink on a page. My love, he thinks, I am standing on the roof of the world tonight. The stars here are brighter than you could ever imagine. They look like shattered glass scattered across black velvet. It is cold, but I am okay. I am standing here so that the others can sleep, just as someone stood watch for me last night. I am looking at the stars, and I am pretending that you are looking at them, too. Keep the porch light on for me. I am carrying your heart right here in my pocket. Beside him, the boy from Appalachia leans against the sandbags, his eyes scanning the dark, empty valley below. He is entirely focused, his senses extended into the night, yet his soul is completely at peace. He feels a deep, sweeping sense of purpose. He is not fighting a battle in this quiet hour. He is simply keeping his brothers safe. He listens to the slow, steady breathing of the sleeping men in the tents behind him, a rhythmic, comforting sound that reminds him of a sleeping household. There is a pure, unadulterated heroism in simply staying awake. To fight off the heavy, dragging weight of exhaustion, to stand perfectly still in the freezing cold so that someone else might find a few hours of rest, this is the quietest, most beautiful love a soldier can offer. It is a love that asks for no recognition, no medals, and no grand parades. It only asks for a cup of instant coffee and the steady presence of the man standing to your left. Slowly, imperceptibly, the overwhelming darkness begins to weaken. The air grows even colder, that pristine, hushed chill that always precedes the dawn. The stars, which had burned so fiercely all night long, begin to soften and fade into the deepening sky. The jagged, eastern peaks of the mountains begin to cut sharp silhouettes against a sky that is turning from bruised purple to a delicate, fragile shade of slate gray. The wind settles down, as if the earth itself is holding its breath in anticipation of the sun. The two soldiers watch the light begin to spill over the ancient rocks. The shadows in the deep valley slowly recede, revealing the sprawling, majestic beauty of the pass. They have made it through the night. They have held the darkness at bay, not with force, but with quiet resilience, shared warmth, and an unwavering devotion to one another. Behind them, the camp begins to stir. The soft crunch of boots on the frozen dust signals the arrival of the next watch. The relief is a heavy, beautiful feeling that washes over their tired shoulders. They turn, their faces pale and drawn, but their eyes shining with a quiet, enduring light. They offer brief, gentle nods to the men taking their place. No grand words are spoken. They simply hand over the watch, a seamless transition of care. They walk back toward the tents, the first rays of the morning sun finally cresting the peaks, casting a warm, golden glow over their tired faces. They unlace their boots with slow, numb fingers, crawling into their cold sleeping bags. They close their eyes, the echo of the wind still whispering softly in their ears, entirely surrounded by the magnificent, ancient silence of the mountains, and surrender at last to a deeply earned, peaceful sleep. There is a tender, forgiving hour just before the dark, when the fierce heat of the desert day finally exhales, and the ancient dust turns to drifting gold. Patrolling the dusty, ancient streets of Iraq at twilight, soldiers find unexpected moments of shared humanity, a wave from a local child, the smell of baking bread, and the quiet yearning for their own families. For the young men and women walking softly through these winding, labyrinthine alleyways, the world has slowed to a beautiful, rhythmic pace. They are far from the green pine forests and the sprawling, rainy cities of their youth. They are moving through a landscape that is incredibly old, a place where the stones beneath their heavy boots have baked under the sun for thousands of summers. The walls that line the narrow streets are made of thick, pale clay and ancient brick, absorbing the intense heat of the afternoon, and now, as the sun begins its slow descent, gently radiating that warmth back into the cooling evening air. These soldiers, carrying the heavy, protective weight of their armor and their canvas packs, do not walk with the hurried, frantic energy of the day. They step with a slow, deliberate grace, their senses attuned to the quiet, shifting rhythms of the neighborhood around them. The harsh, blinding glare of the Middle Eastern sun has melted away, leaving behind a sky that is bruising into breathtaking shades of crushed apricot, soft lavender, and deep, velvety indigo. The dust that always hangs in the air, kicked up by tires and footsteps and the dry desert wind, catches this fading light, turning the very atmosphere into a glowing, suspended curtain of gold. It is the twilight hour. It is the time when the heavy burdens of the world seem to briefly pause, and the universal, deeply human rituals of the evening begin to unfold. As the patrol turns down a narrow, residential street, a profound shift occurs in the air. The scent of diesel and hot sand is suddenly chased away by something entirely unexpected, something so pure and incredibly familiar that it stops a young soldier in his tracks. It is the smell of baking bread. From a small, walled courtyard just a few feet away, the sweet, earthy aroma of flatbread cooking in a hot clay oven drifts out into the alley. It is a warm, yeasty perfume mixed with the faint, woody scent of a small fire. To the young man from a quiet farming town in the American Midwest, the smell is an instant, powerful tether to a world he left behind. He closes his eyes for just a fraction of a second, breathing in deeply. He is no longer standing in heavy armor in a foreign city. He is standing in his grandmother's kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, watching her hands knead flour on a wooden table, the windows fogged with the comforting steam of a family meal. He opens his eyes, a soft, hidden smile touching the corners of his mouth. He looks at the soldier walking beside him, a quiet girl from the bustling, noisy avenues of New York, and he sees the exact same realization softening her tired eyes. They do not need to speak. In the simple, beautiful scent of warm bread, the vast, intimidating differences between this ancient city and their own distant homes instantly vanish. They realize, with a sudden, sweeping comfort, that mothers everywhere are simply trying to feed their children, to gather their families around a fire, to coax a little warmth and love from the earth before the night falls. They continue their slow walk down the cooling street. The city is beginning to settle. Old men bring small, plastic chairs out to the edges of the dirt roads, sitting together to catch the evening breeze, speaking in soft, rhythmic murmurs that blend with the wind. A soldier nods respectfully as he passes them, a gentle dip of his heavy helmet. One of the old men pauses his conversation, looks up at the young face beneath the armor, and slowly, gently nods back. It is a microscopic moment of grace. It is a silent acknowledgement that beneath the uniforms and the differences of language, they are all just weary travelers sharing the same beautiful, fading light. Suddenly, a heavy wooden door creaks open just a few inches. From the shadowed doorway, a small figure steps tentatively into the golden dust. It is a little boy, perhaps 5 years old, wearing a faded blue t-shirt and walking on bare, dust-covered feet. He stands by the edge of the street, his large, dark eyes wide with curiosity as he watches the line of soldiers pass. To the boy, these men and women must look like giants, wrapped in strange, heavy gear, walking through his neighborhood. A young paratrooper, carrying the heavy weight of a radio on his back, stops his slow march. He is a father himself, with a little boy exactly this age sleeping in a small bedroom thousands of miles across the ocean. The soldier kneels down in the dust, bringing himself entirely down to the child's eye level. The heavy armor, the miles marched, the exhaustion of the long deployment, all of it melts away in the quiet warmth of the Iraqi twilight. The soldier slowly raises his hand, his thick glove covered in the pale dust of the street, and offers a soft, gentle wave. The little boy stares for a moment, his head tilting slightly to the side. And then, a brilliant, unrestrained smile breaks across his face. He raises his own small, bare hand and waves back, his fingers whittling with pure, innocent joy. The soldier reaches carefully into his cargo pocket, his fingers finding a small, foil-wrapped piece of hard candy he had been saving for days. He holds it out, his palm open and flat. The child takes a cautious step forward, his tiny fingers brushing against the heavy leather of the soldier's glove as he takes the sweet. The boy whispers a soft word of thanks in a language the soldier does not speak, but perfectly understands. As the soldier stands back up and continues down the street, his heart feels impossibly light. In the face of that local child, he saw the face of his own son. He feels a sudden, profound yearning, a dull, beautiful ache in his chest for the feeling of his own child's arms wrapped around his neck. But it is not a desperate sadness, it is a grounding, absolute love. It is the quiet resilience that keeps him putting one foot in front of the other. He knows that he is walking these ancient streets so that children everywhere, in this dusty alleyway and in the quiet suburbs of America, can sleep safely when the sun goes down. As the twilight deepens, the sky surrenders its golden hues, turning a rich, majestic purple. And then, floating out over the flat rooftops and the winding streets, comes the evening call to prayer. It is a sweeping, hauntingly beautiful melody that echoes from the tall minarets, weaving its way through the cooling air. It is not a sound of conflict, it is a profound, musical lullaby for an ancient city. The soldiers walk softly through the song, their footsteps a gentle, respectful rhythm beneath the soaring vocals. They do not share the faith of the people singing, but they entirely feel the deep, sacred reverence of the hour. They feel the universal human need to look up at the fading sky and whisper a gentle word of gratitude to the universe. The patrol finally turns back toward the safety of their small, sandbagged outpost. The streets are completely dark now, illuminated only by the warm, yellow glow spilling from the windows of the homes they pass, and the brilliant, silver light of a rising desert moon. When they pass through the heavy gates of their camp, the collective sigh of relief is almost a physical presence in the air. They drop their heavy canvas packs into the dust. They unbuckle their helmets and pull the thick, protective vests from their aching shoulders. The cool night wind brushes against their damp shirts, a soothing, invisible balm against their tired skin. They pull small, canvas folding chairs into a circle in the dark, settling down into the profound comfort of the night. Someone opens a warm bottle of water, passing it quietly to the soldier sitting next to them. They sit in the shadows, entirely surrounded by the gentle, unwavering brotherhood they have built in this distant land. A young woman sits a little apart from the group, resting her notebook on her knees. By the faint, red glow of a small flashlight, she begins to write a letter to her husband. "My love," her pen whispers against the paper. "The sun just went down over the city. You would not believe the colors of the sky here. It looks like spilled watercolor paint. We walked through a neighborhood today, and I smelled bread baking. It smelled exactly like that little bakery at the end of our street, the one we go to on Sunday mornings. I closed my eyes and I was right back there with you, holding your hand." She pauses, looking up at the vast, starry sky stretching over the Iraqi desert. "It is hard being so far away," she writes, her handwriting softening with emotion. "But today, a little boy waved at us from a doorway. He had the brightest smile. It reminded me that the world is not so big after all. The people here, they love their families just like we do. They just want a quiet evening and a safe place to sleep. I am holding on to that thought tonight. It makes the distance feel a little shorter. Go to sleep knowing that I am safe and that I am looking at the same moon that is shining through your window." She folds the letter, tucking it gently into an envelope. It is a small, paper vessel of hope, carrying her heart across oceans and continents, proving that no amount of desert dust or miles of sea can sever the invisible threads of love. The camp grows incredibly quiet. The soldiers lie back on their cots, staring up at the ceiling of their tents or out into the vast, starlit canopy of the desert night. The heavy armor has been cast aside. The watchful tension of the patrol has slowly unspooled, leaving them wrapped in a deep, peaceful exhaustion. Outside the wire, the ancient city sleeps. The clay ovens have cooled. The children are tucked into their beds, dreaming beneath the same vast, sweeping sky. The soldiers of the Airborne, resting in the cool dark, breathe in the quiet night air. They have walked through the streets of fading light, finding not a world of strangers, but a beautiful, profound reflection of their own humanity. They close their eyes, cradled by the sweet smell of remembered bread, the gentle echo of a child's laugh, and the absolute, unwavering comfort of the love waiting for them back home. They surrender to sleep, safe in the knowledge that morning will always come, bringing the sun to warm the ancient earth once more. There is a gentle, forgiving softness to the wind when it has finally finished its long journey across the entire world and comes to rest in the branches of a familiar tree. Old men sit quietly on their porches, feeling the evening breeze brush against their withered cheeks, remembering the ghosts of their youth in a gentle, peaceful lullaby that honors the eternal bond of those who fell from the sky. The sun is beginning its slow, golden descent, painting the quiet suburban streets and the long country roads in heavy, beautiful strokes of amber and rose. The harsh, blinding light of the afternoon has melted away, leaving behind a world that feels incredibly still and profoundly safe. On wooden porches across the country, the rhythmic, soothing creak of a rocking chair or a suspended porch swing measures the passing of the twilight. An old man sits entirely wrapped in this twilight, a soft knitted cardigan pulled comfortably over his sloping shoulders. His hands, resting quietly on the arms of his chair, are a map of a long, deeply lived life. They are spotted with age, the knuckles thick and the skin as thin as worn parchment. But if you look closely, you can still see the quiet, enduring strength in them. These are hands that once pulled the heavy webbing of a parachute harness. These are hands that once dug into the red clay of Georgia, the damp earth of a European forest, the dense mud of a tropical jungle, and the fine, pale dust of an endless desert. They are the hands that held the entire world, and now they simply hold a warm ceramic mug of tea, letting the gentle heat seep into the tired, aching joints. He closes his eyes as the evening breeze rustles the leaves of the great oak tree in his front yard. To anyone else, it is just the wind. But to him, the wind is a memory. It is a time machine, carrying the faint, beautiful echoes of a life lived suspended between the heavens and the earth. When the breeze touches his face, he is no longer sitting on a porch in the quiet twilight of his autumn years. He is young again. He feels the sudden, breathtaking rush of the cold air rushing through the open door of a great metal airplane. He feels the heavy, reassuring weight of the canvas on his back. He remembers that singular, suspended heartbeat of a moment just before he stepped out into the absolute unknown. In his memory, the jump is no longer terrifying. The fear that once fluttered in his chest has long since been washed away by time, leaving only the pure, magnificent awe of the fall. He remembers the sudden, beautiful silence when the great silk canopy blossomed overhead. He remembers floating in that vast ocean of air, entirely untethered from the heavy burdens of the ground. He remembers looking to his left and his right, seeing the sky filled with the beautiful, blooming umbrellas of his brothers, drifting softly through the moonlight or the golden afternoon sun. They were a flock of quiet birds, falling gently into the pages of history. The wind whispers through the porch screens, a soft, shushing sound that brings him back to the present. He takes a slow, deep breath of the cool evening air. It smells of cut grass, of impending rain, and of the sweet, earthy scent of blooming jasmine. It is the smell of home. It is the smell of the peace he helped to build, the quiet sanctuary he carried in his heart through all the dark, freezing nights so many decades ago. Inside the house, resting on a small, polished wooden desk, is a simple cedar box. It does not hold medals of bronze or silver. It does not hold grand, official citations. It holds something infinitely more precious. It holds a stack of thin, yellowed envelopes, tied gently together with a piece of faded twine. These are the letters. They are the fragile paper bridges that kept his spirit tethered to the earth when he was entirely lost in the shadows. He knows every crease of those papers. He knows the faded blue ink that spells out the name of the girl who eventually became his wife, the girl who left the porch light on for him every single night until he finally returned. He remembers the exact moments those letters were written. He remembers sitting by a dim kerosene lantern in a damp canvas tent, listening to the rain drum against the roof. He remembers crouching in a frozen hollow of snow, using a stub of a pencil to tell a gentle lie about being warm. He remembers sitting in the red dirt under a strange, tropical canopy, wiping the sweat from his brow so it would not blur the ink. Those letters are not just words on a page. They are the profound, captured essence of love. They are the proof that even in the darkest, coldest corners of the world, the human heart will always reach out for the light. He does not need to open the box to feel their warmth. The love contained within them surrounds him entirely, a protective, eternal blanket that has kept him safe for a lifetime. As the sky turns a deep, bruised purple, the neighborhood begins to settle into the night. A few doors down, a younger man walks slowly up his driveway, carrying a briefcase, returning from a long day of ordinary work. The old man watches him from the porch. He knows this younger neighbor. He knows that just a few years ago, this young man also wore the heavy boots. He knows that this young man also stood at the open door of an aircraft, feeling the rush of the wind before stepping out into the dark skies over a distant, rocky mountain pass. The younger man pauses by his mailbox. He looks down the street, his eyes finding the old man sitting quietly in the shadows of the porch. Across the manicured lawns and the quiet asphalt, a profound, entirely unspoken conversation takes place. The younger man offers a slow, deeply respectful nod. It is a gesture that carries the weight of a shared secret. I know the wind, the nod says. I know the heavy canvas. I know the quiet of the silk. I know the dark. The old man nods back, raising his warm mug just an inch. I know, his return gesture says. You carry it now. But you are home. Rest your weary shoulders. You are safe. They are separated by generations, by different oceans and entirely different deserts, but they belong to the exact same, unbroken family. They are the children of the wind. They are bound together by the shared sacrifice, the shared exhaustion, and the shared, breathtaking beauty of falling from the sky. The street lamps flicker on, casting warm, yellow pools of light onto the pavement. The old man leans his head back against the wooden slats of his rocking chair, closing his eyes once more. In the beautiful, soft darkness behind his eyelids, the ghosts of his youth come to visit. But they are not frightening ghosts. They do not carry the noise or the sorrow of the past. They come as they were in the very best, quietest moments. He sees the boy from Ohio, handing over a perfectly preserved piece of peppermint candy in the damp forests of France. He sees the farmhand from Kansas, holding open a threadbare blanket in the freezing snow, offering a vital, miraculous warmth. He sees the quiet medic, wiping the mud from a shivering face with the tenderness of a mother. He sees them sitting in the tall, dry grass of the Mediterranean, sharing a single canteen of tepid water beneath a canopy of brilliant stars. They are forever young in his heart. Their faces are unlined by time, their smiles easy and bright. They gather around him on the quiet porch, unseen by the rest of the world, taking their seats on the wooden steps and leaning against the railings. They have come to keep him company in the twilight. He does not feel sorrow for their absence. He feels a profound, sweeping gratitude for their presence. They gave him their water, they gave him their warmth, and they gave him the quiet courage he needed to survive. He lived the rest of his life for them. He built a home, he loved a family, he watched his children grow in the warm sunlight, and he did it all carrying their memory in his chest like a gentle, eternal flame. We made it, he whispers into the evening breeze, his voice soft and trembling with a beautiful, heavy love. We finally made it all the way home. The wind rustles the oak leaves in a soft, murmuring agreement. It is the sound of 1,000 silk canopies settling softly onto the earth. It is the sound of 1,000 heavy boots finally being unlaced and set by the door. The night fully embraces the world. Above the quiet rooftops of the neighborhood, the stars begin to prick through the velvet blackness of the sky. They are the exact same stars that guided him through the olive groves, the same stars that watched over the snow-draped forests, the same stars that shined so brilliantly over the vast, silent deserts. They are the great, eternal watchers of the world, and tonight, they shine entirely with peace. The old man takes one final, slow breath of the fragrant night air. The heavy burdens of his youth, the long marches, the deep snows, the endless waiting, they have all dissolved into the absolute tranquility of the present moment. He is surrounded by the love of his family, sleeping safely in the rooms behind him, and the love of his brothers, sitting quietly in the shadows beside him. He sets his empty mug on the small wooden table next to his chair. He stands up, his movements slow and careful, feeling the familiar, grounding weight of gravity holding him safely to the floor. He walks to the front door, his hand resting on the brass handle for just a moment. He turns back to look at the dark, peaceful yard one last time. He leaves the porch light on. It is a beacon for the memories, a warm, glowing promise that they will never be forgotten in the dark. He steps inside, the door clicking softly shut behind him. The porch is left empty, save for the gentle rocking of the chair and the soft, beautiful whispering of the wind. The journey is complete. The long night has ended. The sky has released its hold, and the boys who once fell like autumn leaves have found their final, perfect rest in the warm, welcoming arms of the earth. The world is quiet. The world is safe. And enveloped in the soothing, eternal lullaby of the peaceful dark, the airborne family finally sleeps.